I'm David Scandura.
I'm Justus Burkett.
And today we're here to find out, is Dune Part 2 the greatest movie ever made?
May thy knife chip and shatter.
May thy knife chip and shatter.
Welcome to the greatest movie ever made, the show where we watch a movie and tell you if it's the greatest movie ever made.
Lisan al-Gaib!
A movie that is so thoroughly entertaining and compelling that while you're watching it, it's the only thing that matters in the world.
That was my Javier Bardem impression.
Yes.
Lisan al-Gaib!
Very good. Justice, bless the hosts and their podcast. Bless the ramblings and cum jokes of them.
Mm-hmm.
May their episodes cleanse the RSS feed. May they keep the RSS feed for their dipshits.
That's right.
We're here. We're doing it.
We're doing it. We're doing it.
Yep, we made that joke last week.
Yes, we did, and
It's
I'm doing. You know what? I'm doing it part 2. Yeah, because it feels like just a massive extension of last week's episode. It feels like we're. Well, I mean, I guess that's literally what we're doing. We're just continuing the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And much like Denis Villeneuve, we got all of the background out of the way last time, so.
That's right.
Hopefully we can get right to it.
It can just be action, just like the movie.
I am David Scandura, joined as always by my co-host and the Kwisatz Haderach of drinking beers, Justus Burkett.
Not a beer right now, but I am having a little canned tequila margarita. Ooh. So I think still in the spirit
yes.
of things. Even the Kwisatz Haderach of drinking beers has to take a break from beer every once in a while.
Yes, drinking the margarita of life.
Yes.
How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. I took a few days off work. I was down in Phoenix, doing some stuff, seeing family, going to the Renaissance Festival, which is like a annual activity of mine, and all that has been fun and good. So I am good. And I saw Dune 2 again last night after the Renaissance Festival and dinner with my family. So I saw a 9:45 p.m. showing of a 3-hour movie, and I was so very tired. But I slept in a lot today, so I'm still doing good. I'm not going to fall asleep during this record. How are you, David?
I'm good. I went to the dentist today. First time going to the dentist in almost 10 years. Holy shit. Yikes. Take care of yourself, ladies and gentlemen. It seems like relatively okay. I'll need to get a more thorough cleaning done, but otherwise I don't think there's any major work that needs to happen.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I got to hang out with your cat this weekend.
Yes, thank you for cat sitting for us.
Shout out to love that boy.
We may bleep that because he is fiercely private, and I don't know if he wants his name publicized.
The podcat.
Yes, the podcat. High Priestess Pod's son.
Yes. As far as media recommendations go, have you heard of this thing called Dune? Because I watched Dune Part 2 last week, and then I watched David Lynch's Dune, and then the Sci-Fi Channel miniseries of Dune, and then the Sci-Fi Channel miniseries of Children of Dune, which is Dune Messiah and Children of Dune in one miniseries, which I'd never seen before. So yeah, I've been Duning it, and then there's this thing called Star Wars, and I watched.
Heard of it?
I watched,
motherfucker.
I watched Attack the Clones and Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
Which
are bad.
Not great movies.
They're bad.
And a very, very interesting contrast with how to do this particular type of character arc.
Yes. How to do the flawed Messiah who, ascends to power at the expense of, his morality, his soul, and, his relationships with the people that he loves. Yeah. We're not going to do the George Lucas bit again on this episode. I think we probably did enough of that last week. Probably. Never say never, I guess. But, man, yeah, Revenge of the Sith truly is just what if Dune Messiah sucked shit and was stupid, huh?
I was watching it, and there's a point where George realizes, holy shit, he has to become Darth Vader now.
Right.
Let's just do that.
Yeah.
And then compared to Dune Part 2, which I think does a much better job showcasing Paul Atreides' descent into anti-hero, villain, fascist, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
BT dubs, spoilers for Dune Part 2.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. We're going to be talking about the whole movie. We're going to be spoiling literally everything. This is a spoiler... I don't know if you'd call it a review, a spoiler conversation about Dune Part 2. So we know the movie just came out. If you haven't seen the movie and you're interested in seeing the movie, fucking see the movie before you listen to this.
Yeah, also it's a 60-year-old book, so get a fucking library card, you dorks. Jesus. Paul Atreides is the bad guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's not good. Yeah, all of the discourse, and there thankfully is not very much of it, but anytime you see it is still frustrating. Any of the discourse where it's like, did we need another white savior story? Like, this Dune Part 2 is like about this white guy leading all of these like indigenous peoples in this fucking rebellion against like their white overlords. Right? And it's like, well, that sucks. And it's like, yeah, the point of the fucking story is that it sucks. Like literally the whole point of Frank Herbert's book and this movie, which is a good adaptation of it, is white saviors are bad. Yeah. That's the whole thing. So if you watch this movie and somehow don't get that, I really don't know how to help you, because it's like you just have zero media literacy. If your takeaway from Dune Part 2 is like, oh man, the fucking white savior thing is run amok in Hollywood, it's like, it's a critique of that.
Well, if we get Dune Messiah, hopefully those people will have their worlds shaken at the point when Paul Atreides is like, I've killed 60 billion people.
Yes.
I've killed more
Space
people
Hitler.
than anyone in history.
Yes.
That makes me a bad person.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, they'll be able to have any subtlety stripped away from them in the third installment if Villeneuve gets to make it, which I hope he does.
Yeah. It sounds like it's doing well so far.
People are going to see it. People are talking about it. It seems promising. It ends on a we'll talk about the movie, but it ends on a note where it's like, people are gonna want to see the third one of these. They didn't just wrap everything up cleanly.
Yeah. Here
they left it like, no, there's more to tell of this story. Yeah. So I think audiences will want the third installment, hopefully. And yeah, so fingers crossed, knock on wood, never put anything past the fucking dickheads at Warner Brothers. But yeah, if this thing makes enough money, we should be able to see Dune Messiah. So that's cool.
Yeah.
that may happen.
Considering they pushed this movie back because of the strikes, and they didn't want to because they don't want to pay people.
Yeah.
And David Zaslav loves just canceling movies. I'm hoping and praying that we get Dune Messiah. Although this movie does end where the first book ends.
Right.
And if it's all that we had,
it's a complete story.
I would be okay with it.
Yeah.
It's the complete story.
Yeah.
It's just people are going to want to see more if they haven't heard or if they don't know the third book.
Yeah.
Or the next book.
I certainly want to see more, and I also want an excuse to finally force myself to finish reading Dune Messiah, which if this sequel gets greenlit, I will no longer be able to not read that book. So
yeah, you'll have no excuse.
Exactly. I'll have to do it then.
So we've seen the movie twice.
Yeah.
We caught it early at an advanced screening.
Yes.
In IMAX in Phoenix. It's been a week, and we've said maybe 10 minutes worth of opinions or thoughts about this movie to each other.
Pretty much exactly 5 minutes worth of opinions, as a matter of fact, because High Priestess Pod had a suggestion that we do 5 minutes of unfiltered, just right off the dome, first impressions after watching the movie for the first time in that IMAX screening that David is talking about. So we did record just on like a voice memo on my phone, 5 minutes of immediate reactions right after leaving the theater. The first time we saw it, which we will insert into the episode so you can hear our kind of first thoughts upon our first viewing of Dune. We'll insert that right here. So David and I just saw Dune Part 2 in IMAX. And before we record the actual episode on it, we're going to record these immediate thoughts following the movie.
Straight off the dome.
Right off the dome. David, what did you think of Dune Part 2 very briefly? Because we're restricting this to 5 minutes.
It's good. There's so many things to talk about. There's so many things to process. Overall, I'm quite happy with it, I would say. Justus, what do you think?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I definitely liked it. It's definitely one that I'm excited to go back to and get more from it. But on first watch, on immediate like first impression, I kind of think I like part 1 better, but I didn't dislike part 2. I liked part 2. It just feels like part 1 had a lot more of the mood and the world building and stuff, and this one was like a shit ton of just plot point set piece, you know, and it feels like we had a little bit less time to just kind of live in the world, which is one of the things I like so much about part 1. That being said, still really enjoyed myself, thought it was awesome. Definitely the spectacle is on another level on this one than it is on number 1, because a lot of the most action-packed parts of the book are in the second half, so it makes sense. But yeah, I also thought they focused a lot on Chani's character, which is not really a thing in the book. And I thought that was a good choice. I thought fleshing her out more and giving her more to do and more agency was something that I view as a positive. And I thought Zendaya's performance was really good. I haven't really seen her very much and stuff, and I thought she was really good in this.
Yeah, I agree. I think giving Chani more agency and a larger voice in the story was a good decision as well. I want to circle back to what you said about the pacing of the film. I think the first one moved quicker for me.
Yeah.
I think this one was slower. It's also longer. Mm-hmm. But you really feel the length with this one. This one feels like a long, plodding journey with lots of moving pieces, but also time to live and sit and breathe in the world, I think.
Okay.
And this really leans into the mysticism and the religious elements and the mystical mumbo-jumbo of Frank Herbert.
Which, I love that.
And it's pretty sick. It's pretty sweet.
Which, that leads us into a choice that they made, because a lot of the mystical mumbo-jumbo and a lot of, like, the spiritual shit is very focused on Lady Jessica in this movie.
Yes.
And they made a decision that differs from the book pretty significantly, which is that Aaliyah Atreides is not born in this movie. We don't get little baby Aaliyah running around. So a lot of her role in the book, with like being this weird magic person who just kind of freaks everybody out, a lot of that was put kind of on Lady Jessica instead. How did you feel about that?
So first of all, Rebecca Ferguson, still great in the role.
She fucking rocks.
Terrifying at points in this movie, legitimately terrifying. And I think the decision to keep Aaliyah, to still have the relationship between her and Aaliyah, but do it in a very interesting way where Aaliyah isn't born yet and they're communicating while Aaliyah is still in the womb, was deeply unsettling. And a very cool choice and a very cool decision.
And it's really creepy. Those utero shots.
And I think Aaliyah in the book kills the Baron.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. That's right.
In this movie, Paul kills the Baron, and I think that was not necessarily a change for the better, because I don't necessarily know what I like better, but I think it was a well-done decision to put more agency and put more on Paul in that moment.
Put more focus on Paul, and in his kind of quest for revenge for his family, right? And I think I agree with that. I think that decision for me was sort of like a net neutral, right, as opposed to an improvement or a decrease in how much I liked it versus like how it's done in the book. I like Aaliyah killing the Baron in the book, but like I feel like I liked it as much to have Paul do it. And it also, like, the Emperor's kind of involved in his death too, because he's got his little life support from his poisoning incident that they like sever first, so he's like already weakened. Like, it's like I kind of like how they handle that whole thing. It was fun,
and I think it leaves the ending on a lot more of an ambiguous note. In comparison to the book, this kind of feels like a middle chapter, even though it's the conclusion of the first book. So
So we liked it.
Yes.
We liked it.
Those are our thoughts.
Those were our thoughts in 5 minutes. Now you're going to hear our whole episode on it. Bye. So that was our initial impression of Dune on the first Dune Part 2 on the first viewing. I don't remember a lot of what I said, and we didn't listen to it before I just did that just now. But I do remember one thing, which will be interesting to revisit in this conversation, which is that I said that I think on first viewing, I liked Part 1 more than Part 2. We're going to come back to that maybe, because I the second viewing has maybe given me a little bit more to say on that.
Yeah. So you saw it last night. I saw it a couple days ago with my dad for the second time. I wanted a good. I think it was good that we both waited like a week between viewings to let the movie really sink in. Before we get into like the big stuff, I have a little speed round of just a few little short things. Just give me your quick thumbs up, thumbs down, and maybe a quick blurb about how you feel.
Okay, sounds good. Also, by the way, before we get into this, I do have to just take the very briefest detour to say that IMAX screening, least comfortable fucking movie theater seats I have ever sat
so
in.
Bad.
It was literally like sitting on an airplane. It was like an airplane seat. It was like stiff, rigid, didn't recline, fucking tiny ass seats and the armrest, like the armrest did go up.
Yeah.
But like that was like it.
Yeah.
In terms of like expanding the space that you had. Fucking dog shit seats.
And the sound was good, also probably too loud.
It was so loud. Watching it last night, I was like, oh, this movie isn't making my ears hurt this time.
The guy next to me was actually like covering his ears during some of the louder sections.
I was literally, I think I told High Priestess Pod when I got home, I was like, that was a viewing of a movie where I kind of wished that I had been wearing earplugs as if I was going to a metal show. Like it almost felt like I needed hearing protection for how loud it was. Otherwise great viewing, but man, a little too loud, and also those seats fucking suck shit. Anyway.
All right, so speed round. Quick thumbs up, thumbs down, and a little blurb about how you feel.
Love it.
No Harkonnen spider.
Thumbs down. I'm giving a thumbs down.
Thumbs down too. I want to see that freaky fuck.
Yeah. Show me more of that Harkonnen spider. If we could have gotten multiple of the Harkonnen spiders, I would have been happy about that. Also, I don't think this will also be included in the lightning round, but if it is, I hope I'm not spoiling a future question. But Stilgar also mentions the crazy like trapdoor spiders and the centipedes and shit.
Oh.
And we don't see any of that shit either. And I was like, he's telling me about all these weird fucking Arrakis creatures, and I feel like I'm being promised something that wasn't delivered. So in addition to the Harkonnen spider point, just more broadly, show me more weird critters in these movies.
Well, he also mentions the Djinn, and I was reading Dune this weekend, and the Djinn is mentioned in Dune, so it is like canon to Frank Herbert's book. But it's not a part of the plot, so it's not in the movie.
Lightning round continues. I may be fucking up the whole premise of a lightning round by then expounding on the questions.
It's okay. No guild navigator.
I see. That's a thumbs up for me.
Yeah,
I say save something for part 3.
I'm gonna say thumbs up because I was thinking about it while I read the book. And at the very end, there's 2 guild navigators at the end of the book that show up for the Emperor and the fight with Fade Routha. Yeah. And they're just described as people.
Right.
Just guys, just dudes. And then in Messiah, he kind of retcons him to be freaky, weird
fish guys, which I think you can even find an internal logic of that, where it's like maybe the ones that look kind of human are like early stage guild navigators, and then as they get more advanced, they maybe get more freaky and fishy or whatever.
Yeah. So that's what I was thinking in the first one, because during the changeover of Arrakis, we see guys in like helmets, and you can sort of see there might be something fucked up under there in their, like spice helmets. Yeah. So I've always assumed that those could be guild navigators. And
I think they even say
this version of, I mean, they do say they're representatives
from
of
the Spacing Guild. Yeah.
But they don't necessarily say what they are.
Right.
So maybe those are Denis' version of the guild navigators, or they're just guild navigators on an early stage. Otherwise, as much as I want to see a freaky fish guy, I'm okay with it. There wasn't really nowhere to insert it in the story.
Yeah, I feel like it wasn't necessary for the movie. And also, just save something for part 3, because one of the not main characters, but a important character in Messiah is a guild navigator.
Yeah.
So it's like, we'll get a guy in there if they make part 3 anyway.
Okay. No Thufir Hawat.
That one's a hard one. I think it was the right choice for the movie, but I'm still going to give a thumbs down to that because Stephen McKinley Henderson fucking rocks so hard in part 1. And it just bums me out that he's not in part 2, especially because Thufir Hawat's role in the book, in kind of the second half after the fall of House Atreides, is he basically becomes Baron Harkonnen's mentat.
Yeah.
Because Pitter is killed when Duke Leto does the poison, right? So Baron Harkonnen needs a new Mentat, and he basically like has Thufir Hawat as like a hostage who he also is making like work for him, and that is always that dynamic in the book is very interesting to me, and I enjoy it a lot. And I think having some Stephen McKinley Henderson with Stellan Skarsgård, like having a couple of two-hander scenes between the two of them would have been fun, and I think maybe they could have found time to do it, even though this is already a long-ass movie. So like thumbs down from me, but I also understand the choice to not include it.
I'm going thumbs up.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, we drove home, and it was at 2:00 in the morning, and I was like, Thufir Hawat wasn't in that fucking movie.
Yeah.
It took me that long to realize it.
It is sort of a thing where you don't really miss him, right?
Yeah.
You don't really think about it. Sorry if you just heard my can open on the
Grip it and
I don't
rip
know
it,
if I'm going to
buddy.
be able to edit that out.
Rip it and rip it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, it is one of the things where you don't really notice that he's gone during the movie, but you kind of think about it afterwards and you're like, oh yeah, no Stephen McKinley Henderson.
Yeah, and his role in the second half of the book, it's interesting, but they don't do much with it.
Yeah.
He doesn't have that many scenes, and I don't really know where they could have fit it in. I know they did shoot scenes as well. This will tie into my next question. They did shoot scenes, but Denis Villeneuve is not going to release the deleted scenes.
Yeah.
I would like to see those, maybe.
Release the scenes, Denis. What the fuck, man?
So my next question, no Tim Blake Nelson.
No Tim Blake Nelson.
He was cast in an undisclosed role.
Oh, that's right.
He shot his scenes and he was not in the final film.
That's right. Yeah, thumbs up from me. I don't feel like I need to see what Tim Blake Nelson's unreleased scenes were.
Okay.
I think I'm okay with it.
I'm going to give it a thumbs down.
Okay.
I was really interested to see what that was.
Yeah.
The only thing that comes to mind is maybe Count Fenring, because he's not in this movie
Right,
at all.
right. They sort of combine Count Fenring and Lady
Yeah.
Fenring into one character, it seems like.
But he's a good actor, and I thought he was an interesting choice for this universe.
Yeah.
And disappointed I don't get to see him. The last one that I have for the lightning round, the only other thing that I could think of is no Aaliyah Atreides, except for being a fetus, and Anya Taylor-Joy for 2 seconds, but she isn't actually born in the events of this movie.
I'm gonna go full. We're gonna take it to Siskel and Ebert territory, and I'm gonna give that a 2 thumbs up. I think that was the fucking very best choice for a movie adaptation of Dune, because here's the thing: in the book, Aaliyah Atreides, Paul's sister, is like 3 or 4 years old for the second half of the events of the book. There's like a time jump in the book.
Yeah.
And we catch up, and like she's been born. She's like a 3 or 4 year old, and she's like a weird, freaky adult child because of like all the shit with the water of life, which we'll talk about when we talk about the movie. But in the book, it works because you don't have to get an actor to convincingly play an eerily adult 4-year-old, right? In a movie, that shit would be so much fucking harder. And I made a joke on Twitter where I was like, I hope they CGI Anya Taylor-Joy's face on a 4-year-old's body, right? That would, if they actually did that, it would of course suck, right? And it would also suck to just cast a fucking child, like a 4-year-old, to try and convincingly eerily play like someone who is born essentially fully aware and with like the knowledge of all of the previous generations of women who like preceded them, right? It's like that's an impossible task for a 4-year-old actor to pull off, you know? And in terms of like no additional Aaliyah scenes with like visions of the future and stuff, I'm also good with that. I think the 2 seconds that we get of Anya Taylor-Joy sets up the character enough. Hopefully Messiah gets made so we can play with her more.
Yeah,
you know?
it's thumbs up for me as well. And
yeah.
I think that's Denis' little like, hey,
yeah,
if you give me part 3, you get to see more Anya Taylor-Joy.
You get to see more Anya Taylor-Joy. Yeah.
Who's
and more
great...
Florence Pugh, by the way.
Yeah.
Who has a decent amount to do in this movie, but will have a lot more in Messiah.
Sure.
Right.
But I agree. I think in terms of what this movie needs to accomplish, there's really no space for Aaliyah in here.
Yeah.
But they do an interesting thing with her character that isn't really explored in the books that I thought was a really good change and makes another character, Jessica, a lot more interesting too.
They sort of put some of Aaliyah's characterization from the second half of the book just onto Jessica.
Yeah.
In this movie, which I think works a lot. And is great. And we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
In detail here in a second.
That's all I had for the speed round. That went a little bit longer than a normal speed round, I guess, but that's fine.
That's because I can't shut the fuck up, David. I am physically incapable of shutting the fuck up. Well, thanks for the lightning round questions. I have nothing to ask you.
Okay.
So we should just talk about the movie.
Let's talk about the movie now.
Yeah. So Dune Part 2, it picks up pretty much exactly where Dune Part 1 left off, right?
Yeah.
Pretty much exactly. Like we haven't even gotten to Siege Tabor yet, right? Or as they say it in this movie, Siege Tabra.
Yeah.
Which a lot of the pronunciations, it's the thing with adapting sci-fi or fantasy where it's like I as a reader had a way that I was saying this shit in my head, and then they as the writing and directing and team and like the actors on this movie, they make decisions, and I'm like, now I have to fucking figure out how to bridge that.
And it's hard because they say things differently in the different adaptations.
Yeah.
So bridging those is difficult for me too.
Yeah.
But yeah, they run into some Harkonnens.
Okay.
In the middle of this eclipse.
David, this opening scene fucking whips ass.
It's so good.
It's one of my favorite scenes of either movie.
Awesome.
This opening scene, when we saw it in IMAX, I was like, this opening scene happened, and I was like, oh fuck, Denis doing it. He is doing it.
Yeah.
he's because I was like, there is that thing when a director directs like a first installment of something and it's really good, and they come back for the sequel, and you're seeing the sequel for the first time. I feel like there's always the thing where you're like, okay, was the first one like an anomaly, right? And are we going to be able to sustain how good the first one was through an entire other feature-length film, right? And with someone like Denis Villeneuve, it's like, he's a very good director. I like a lot of his other stuff. So it's like that concern isn't as strong, but there is that thing it's like, okay, is he gonna fuck this one up, right? Opening with this scene, my concerns were alleviated. I was like, oh, he absolutely is not fucking this up. He knows exactly what he's doing, and this is gonna be excellent. Because this opening scene fucking rips so hard.
Yeah.
I love the fucking Harkonnens. So it's like, yeah, Paul and Jessica and the Fremen are kind of like, traveling to Siege Tabor. They're like hiding out because they hear this Harkonnen patrol, and the Harkonnens are like looking around. They're like hunting Fremen basically. And at one point, a thumper goes off. Like the Fremen set off a thumper as a distraction,
mm-hmm.
and they're like, "Oh, the rats are calling a worm," and then they fucking float. They're like, "Unit, climb!" Right? Yeah. And they fucking use suspensors to fucking climb this rock face, and it is beautifully shot. The color is fantastic.
It looks like it's all in camera, like they used wires or something.
Yes, it looks amazing.
You know what went off in my head when I saw that in that IMAX theater?
What?
The movie's on! On is the movie! movie!
Dune Part 2 is the name of the movie! What I would give for a fucking VJ-ME track to Dune Parts 1 and 2.
Federalta, oh no! Everybody on Kitty Prime knows Kung Fu!
Yeah. Oh man, I need it.
It whips ass.
Yes, it's so good. So they get to the top of the cliff face.
And then they just start getting sniped.
Yes, okay. And then, so they start getting sniped, and then we cut down to the bottom of the cliffs. And when we saw this in IMAX the first time, and you were sitting next to me, you probably could tell the visceral reaction I had to this next bit, which is bodies are falling from the top of the cliffs and just hitting the ground with such a satisfying amount of, force. These bodies are just going thunk, 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 all around Paul and Jessica. And every time one of those Harkonnen fucking meat sacks hit the ground, I was like, yes!
And we didn't really have a good look at the Harkonnens in the last movie.
Yeah.
In this, they're in these oversized suits, and
they once again look like Bionicles.
Yeah. We get a lot more time with Harkonnen technology in general, which we'll talk about. I love all the Harkonnen tech in this movie.
I like their little spinning air filter thing in the back of the mask. That's fun.
And with how big and clunky and oversized these suits are, it just they're falling and they're hitting the ground really hard.
They are like, they sound like sacks of cement just hitting the fucking sand. It rocks so hard. I love it. It literally is raining men. Hallelujah, it's raining men.
Yeah.
Because there's just Harkonnens fucking dropping like flies in this first scene. It is so good.
And then Paul and Jessica get spotted by one of the Harkonnens. And we see Paul. This is Paul killing the second person that he's ever killed.
Yes.
And it is so starkly different from him killing Jamis.
Yes.
And I love this.
Yeah.
He is he has his knife, his Chris knife.
Yeah.
And he is so brutal and precise when he kills this Harkonnen. And then another one spots him, and Jessica comes up behind the second guy.
Yeah.
And beats the fuck out of him with a rock.
Yes.
To like break the mask of his helmet.
Yeah.
To crush his skull.
And smash his face a bunch of times. Yeah.
And these are both very important moments in their arc for this movie, I think.
I am going to very briefly correct you in that he does not kill this first Harkonnen with a Chris knife. It's the sword of a fallen Harkonnen soldier.
Yeah.
And the reason I pointed out, the reason that I'm being an asshole and correcting you is because it is one of the moments of this scene that I think is so good, because it's this visual storytelling shit that Villeneuve is so good at and has just recently been quoted in a bunch of interviews talking about how he doesn't like dialogue and he likes doing visual storytelling more. But this is an example of like him being good at this shit, right? Because it's like the Harkonnens have been falling, right? And the sound design and the visual of that is so striking. And then there's this one body, right, from that is laying between Paul and this Harkonnen who's like looking around, like trying to find them. And another body falls, and that like gets his attention. He turns around, sees Paul, and then there's this close-up shot on just the sword that is like sheathed on the dead body on the ground. And then Paul just starts fucking running, right? And it's like, oh, and then you as the viewer, you have so much like, there's so much tension, there's so much like anxiety about like, oh, is he gonna get there before like the other guy does? Like, what's gonna happen? And he like gets to the sword and gets it from the corpse and like starts dueling this guy. And it's just like, just the shot of like the hilt of the sword, right, ramps up the tension so much, because you know what he's going for. It's like, there's the object that he's like, that's the action of this scene, you know. And it's just, it's in some ways it's movie making 101, but it's executed immaculately well, and it looks fucking gorgeous.
Yeah, and this whole scene's taking place during an eclipse. Yeah, and it's like it's orange. It gets darker at one point. It's visually very beautiful.
Yeah,
and, he does a really good job making Arrakis feel varied and unique throughout both of these movies. I haven't seen a desert look this beautiful on a movie in a long time.
Anyway, so the Harkonnens have been dispatched. Lady Jessica fucking smashes that guy's head, right? And then the Fremen come back because they were the ones fucking sniping all the dudes and causing the body rain. And so then they start harvesting water.
It's literally just hooking up a tap to a guy and turning it on.
Yeah. And they're like filling these fucking little like rubber bladders full of these dudes' body water. And I fucking Javier Bardem in this movie is so good. Like, he was good in part 1. He has way more to do in part 2.
Yeah.
And I fucking love him in this movie. He's so good. But he has a hilarious delivery when they're like getting the water out of the fucking Harkonnens, and he's like dirty water. It's full of chemicals, but it's good enough for cooling systems.
and then Jessica is about to throw up, and he's like, no, don't
let it out.
The water extractors are so fun because I don't think the book ever really goes into detail about how they do it. I was looking at those and I'm like, I want one that turns water into Miller Lite. Give me the Miller Lite.
Once again, we're putting in pods of hops and malt and just like in your beer still soup.
Yeah.
But it is fun too, that with the Harkonnen water, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're basically like, these guys are full of like steroids, basically, right? Like these guys are full of like a bunch of, performance enhancing chemicals that make their water like not good enough to drink. Right? So instead it's like fucking water for cooling systems or whatever. Whereas like we see the reverence with which the Fremen treat their water in more or less the next scene. I mean, there's like a little bit of stuff here where they're traveling to Sietch Tabor. But then they get there, right? With Jamis's body still, who obviously was killed at the end of the last movie.
Yes.
And they're greeted at Sietch Tabor by the Fremen. Some of them are like rapturously greeting Paul as the Lisan al-Gaib, but a lot of them are also like, get these fucking people out of here, they murdered our friend.
Mm-hmm.
So they're kind of greeted with a mixed reception here.
And I think the design of the Sietch looks really cool.
Yeah,
it's great. It's got a very kind of like temple aesthetic to it, which the Sietches in the books are and in the movie are underground communities, and this has there's writing all over the walls. It's really, really beautifully done set design. And I love I really like the depiction of the Fremen in this movie.
Yeah, me too.
First of all, we get a lot more actors of color.
Yes.
And actors who are of African descent or Middle Eastern descent, going along with the Islamic basis for the Fremen in the books.
Yeah.
And there's a pretty clear divide and diversity among the Fremen as to how they interpret their own mythology and their own religion, and what they think of Paul. And it gives them a lot more color and character than in the book.
Yeah, I agree. There's way more variation here than there is in the book when it comes to kind of how the Fremen are reacting to Paul, but also just the kind of the sub communities within Fremen society, right? One of the things I love in this movie is the book doesn't do this at all. This is basically an invention of the movie. There is like a camp of Fremen, like a group of Fremen who is like very staunchly like, Paul is the Lisan al-Gaib.
Yes.
And there is another group that is very staunchly like, these are old traditions, these are superstitions, we shouldn't allow these prophecies to like guide our lives. The Fremen need to like decide, like self-determine their own fate, right? There's like that group, right? Which that doesn't really exist in the book. And it is so fun and interesting to me, and also clearly very intentional.
Yeah.
That the Lisan al-Gaib crew, right? The crew who are like all in behind Paul are older, right? Visually, like when it shows them, they're always like the older actors and actresses. And then the group that's basically more critical of Paul and is like not sure that he's like the prophesied Messiah, and not really sure that the prophesied Messiah is even like a real thing that's going to happen, right? They're younger. And I'm like, that is Villeneuve saying something. And I think that that's really a really cool addition to this story.
Yeah.
That's not in the source material.
Yeah. You mentioned the white savior narrative critique. I think I can't remember the name of the journalist. I apologize so much. This was an article that was published around the time that the first movie came out. The issue with Dune in a modern context is not if it's a white savior story.
Right.
It's more, what does this book have to say about how Islamic communities are prone to radicalization?
Right.
And I think showing diversity among the Fremen in terms of their opinion and their beliefs is a really good way to add complexity to their culture.
Mm-hmm.
And reading the book very recently, they are kind of depicted with like the stoic, quote unquote, noble savage stereotype.
Right.
And
it's
with Stilgar's passion and Stilgar's belief in the Lisan al-Gaib, that creates some really great moments of humor.
Yeah.
And also humanity and, again, depth to these characters because, like, for instance, Chani is and her friends who are younger don't believe in the legends of the Lisan al-Gaib. And she says it's Bene Gesserit propaganda, which of course it is.
It is, yeah. While we're talking about Chani and the younger group of Fremen who are a little bit more critical of all the religious dogma stuff, but they've essentially added a character who is not like a major player in or doesn't exist in the book at all, who is like Chani's main like friend, who is in like a lot of the scenes and is sort of like the main, other than Chani herself, is kind of like the main naysayer of like the whole Lisan al-Gaib myth, and is kind of pushing back against like Stilgar's dogma, right? I wanted to shout out this actress specifically, and just say that her performance, like all of her scenes with Zendaya, and like later she kind of gets like a big showdown with Fade Rotha at one point, and I really enjoyed her in this movie. I thought she was a great addition.
The actress's name is Suhaila Yaqub, and she plays Shish Hakli. Sorry if I mispronounced any of those words. That is a name from the book, but not really a major character. But yeah, I thought she's good. She has a cool relationship with Chani, and I love that scene with her and Fade Rotha towards the end of the movie. There's an important line here that I think is key to understanding Paul in this movie.
Yeah,
they're sitting and they're eating. And they're kind of in groups, and this is after they've settled into the siege a little bit. Paul is noticing that there are believers and non-believers. And he says to Jessica, I have to find a way to convert the non-believers.
Yeah.
I think this is a very intentional decision to put this line so early in Paul's character arc in this movie, because I think it informs every decision that he makes for the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
Even when he's kind of struggling with his potential destiny, I think he is still doing that as a means of manipulation. And I think even it casts his relationship with Chani as another possible means of manipulation and becoming accepted among the Fremen.
Right. Because she's a non-believer. She's in the non-believer camp.
Right.
Yep.
And in the book, you never really doubt that they're in love, but their relationship is developed very quickly and not very deep. Here, I feel like his relationship with Chani, and especially at the end of the movie, is framed as just another step on his path of converting the Fremen to his cause.
Yeah, and I do think that the movie tells you that he does have some genuine feelings for her in addition to that, right? But I do agree with you. I think it's more complicated than that. I think it's more complicated than he just like, oh yeah, and he also falls in love with this Fremen girl, right? It's like, no, I think this is maybe a calculated move on his part. And also he has genuine feelings for her. Like, it's both things.
Yeah, it's overshadowing everything that he does.
Yeah.
It's lurking in the background, for sure. We get a lot of stuff with the Fremen here at the beginning of the movie. It takes up a good hour or so of the opening of this film. There's a sequence where Stilgar shows Jessica,
woman, come with me.
He shows her the well of sacred water that they have to turn Arrakis green.
I fucking love this little bit so much.
Yeah.
I love them looking at the water, and Stilgar basically, and this is pretty much ripped more or less directly from the book, a lot of what he says, which is he basically is like, no Fremen even dying of thirst would ever touch this water, because this is the water that we're going to use to make Arrakis like a green paradise again when the Lisan al-Gaib arrives, right? So this is like the promised water. It's holy water, right? For them to make the planet grow things again, right? When the Lisan al-Gaib leads them to paradise, which will be a terraformed Arrakis, right? And I love that Jessica's response to this she says so many souls, and she sheds a tear. And I love Javier Bardem, like with his thumb, he takes the tear off her face and licks it, which they don't really lean into this too much in the movie. But this is a moment where I'm like, okay, Denis picked up on this too, which is in the book. Lady Jessica and Stilgar don't canonically ever fuck, at least that we know of. But it seems like there's something there.
Yeah, I think so.
In the book, it kind of seems like there's like, you know, if we weren't doing this like revenge campaign to fucking avenge my late husband's murder, I might fuck this guy.
Well, and the other thing about the Fremen in the book is it's much more of a patriarchal society, and women have more subservient roles.
Yes, a thing that they wisely cut out of this movie is that when Paul kills Jamis in the book, they then gift Jamis's wife to Paul.
Yeah.
Which, good on you for not doing that in this movie.
So, speaking of giving moisture to the dead, and speaking of Jamis.
Yeah.
There is a scene in the book that's Jamis's funeral. It's one of my favorite scenes from the book. In it, essentially, they're going around and they're talking about Jamis, and the phrase that they're repeating is, "I was a friend of Jamis."
Yes, and his name is Robert Paulson.
Yes, sharing an anecdote about their life with Jamis, and Paul gets up and does this too, and he says, "I was a friend of Jamis.
Yeah,
Jamis taught me that when you kill, you pay for it. I wish I had known him better." And he cries. He gives moisture to the dead.
Yeah.
And this is a very important scene, and the Fremen are surprised by this.
Yeah.
And this scene is not in the movie.
It's not in the movie.
How do you feel about it not being in the movie?
So, unlike you, that is not one of my favorite scenes in the book necessarily. It's one that I remember, but it's not one that stuck with me in a huge way. And I don't miss it too much. I like the way they do Jamis's funeral in the movie, with the Fremen kind of doing this kind of ritual funeral kind of call and response, right? While they drain the water from his body and put it in the like the vessel that's holding all of the water from previous dead Fremen. Like, that's all cool. Yeah, I guess I didn't miss it.
Okay.
Yeah, I imagine you feel differently.
I miss it.
Yeah.
I miss it, but it's kind of my banquet scene. It's
right.
like we missed the banquet scene from the first one, but I get it, and I think it still it works fine without it, because in the book that sequence is sort of framed as like, okay, maybe Paul is like trying to genuinely adopt the Fremen ways, or maybe he's doing this again as another form of manipulation and trying to assimilate himself.
Yeah, and
I think we need to frame his actions a little bit more with a little bit more sinister intent at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
And having this scene taken out, I think does that. And also, he's haunted by Jamis throughout this movie.
Yes, which I like.
And I really like that.
I like that a lot too. Yeah. Speaking of things that they changed from the book, by the way, this basically more or less takes us to the Water of Life.
Yes.
Which in the book, the Water of Life is it's sort of like a spice orgy that happens, kinda.
Yeah.
Right? Where it's like everybody gets together and they all kind of have a big bacchanal, right? Where Jessica drinks the Water of Life.
Mm-hmm.
And doesn't everybody drink the Water of Life? Or like other people are drinking the Water of Life? Or is it only her, but everybody else is also just kind of partying?
I think it's only her, because it
will still kill you.
It'll still kill you. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So it is her drinking the Water of Life, but it's like in a big party in the book.
Yeah.
Right? In the movie, they do this in a way that I like a lot. I see for you were like, a scene that stuck with me was the I was a friend of Jamis scene.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the spice orgy was a big thing. And when I say spice orgy, they don't like, Frank Herbert doesn't specify that people are like fucking during this, but there is kind of a feel to it.
Yeah,
where
and
it's
they
like,
do use the word orgy.
Right. So anyway, but yeah, the way they did this in the movie even though that's one of my favorite scenes from the book, and I like really latched on to how Frank Herbert described that scene, I think the way they do it in the movie is very cool and good. And I enjoy this version of The Water of Life a lot, because it puts more of the focus on Jessica.
Yes.
Right? Which I think is what the movie needs. And so basically, like, Stilgar has been like, you know, you have to become our Reverend Mother. Our Reverend Mother's going to die. And so in order to do that, she needs to drink the water of life, which is, you know...
It's bile from the sandworms.
When they die.
Yeah.
When they're drowned in water.
It's poison. And so what she has to do is, like, she has to transmutate the poison into something that's harmless.
Yes.
Inside her body. And this scene... First of all, an incredible performance from Rebecca Ferguson.
Yes.
Like physically shaking, contorting her body. It's like a scene out of a horror movie.
Rebecca Ferguson continues to be one of the best parts of Denis Villeneuve's Dune in part 2. She fucking rules.
And the actress playing the Reverend Mother, I don't have her name in front of me. They got the scariest looking old woman they could fucking find.
Yes. It is, when you say it's like a scene from a horror movie, like, you're totally right. It is very frightening, right? And I love that when she drinks the water of life, like, first of all, I love the old Reverend Mother commanding her with the voice to drink. And then I love when she drinks the water of life. And we didn't talk about this earlier, but there's already been, David, so many fetus shots. So many shots of fetus Aaliyah Atreides in this movie. There are tons of shots of a character in this movie who is an unborn fetus, which is fucking insane for like a multi-million-dollar huge studio blockbuster.
Yeah.
It is nuts that so much of this movie is like, and here's the fetus who's a character in this movie. It's bananas. But in this scene, when she drinks the water of life, we see like the fucking water of life enter like the amniotic sac. You know, like it goes into her uterus and is like surrounding the fetus,
accompanied by Hans Zimmer.
And then David, the fucking wildest thing that Denis Villeneuve gets away with in either of these movies happens, which is we get a close-up of a fetus's eye opening. And it's blue within blue. And now she's a fully aware fetus.
Yeah.
It's fucking crazy.
And the Reverend Mother goes, "Oh, what have we done? She's pregnant." And then she fucking dies.
Yes. This is one of my favorite decisions that this movie makes, kind of distilled into one scene, right? Which is like, we're not going to do the spice orgy because we're going to focus this on Jessica more specifically. And Aaliyah's not going to be born in this movie, so we're kind of just putting the Aaliyah stuff into Jessica's character arc, right? And it's like, by doing it this way, by literally showing the viewer like the fucking water of life gets in that amniotic sac and wakes up the fucking baby, and now she can communicate psychically with her fetus, it like sets the stage for all of the stuff that is very interesting that they do with her character to like make immediate sense to the viewer, because he just shows it to you. Right? He takes the filmmaker approach of being like, okay, the easiest way for me to communicate to you that the water of life has woken this baby up and now it's fully aware is to just film that.
Yeah.
Right? Which is, it's brilliant. It's brilliant for him to just be like, we can just show the fetus waking up.
And then, a little bit later, show a scene of the fetus, like, we hear a muffled conversation, and the fetus turns slightly.
It's wild.
And then later we just have Jessica talking to herself.
Yes.
But then we like pan down and we realize that she's talking to her unborn fetus.
Her belly, yes.
And there's other Fremen noticing.
Yeah.
And
I love her with Paul pretty shortly after the Water of Life. This is one of my favorite interactions between them in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
I think Timothée Chalamet and Rebecca Ferguson have great on-screen like rapport and chemistry. I think them as actors, they gel really well. So it works really well that a lot of this movie is a two-hander between them, right? But I love this scene after Rebecca Ferguson has taken the water of life, right? And she says, she's saying to him, like, now you need to do it, right? Because she's become a Reverend Mother, so now she has all the knowledge of the previous generations of Reverend Mothers, right? And it's given her some degree of prescience. So suddenly she was a little resistant before to Paul's plan. She was basically like, we need to get off world. And he was like, well, I need to convert the Fremen. Now she's all in on converting the Fremen because she has more knowledge, right? And she's got a little bit of the foresight that he'll eventually also get. And she's basically like, oh, you need to take the water of life because then you will be the Kwisatz Haderach. And like, we can fucking take over the universe. And then she says, you will see the beauty and the horror, which she says it like in the Fremen language and it's subtitled. And I was like, that, first of all, that goes insanely hard. And second of all, it's indicative of a thing that I was noticing the second time I watched this movie. Denis Villeneuve will intentionally have characters say things that are very important and need to stick with the viewer in a made-up space language and subtitle them so that you are reading the words. I think he does this on purpose. Right? Where it's basically like, if it's extra important, if it's like super vital for you to absorb this information, he doesn't want to rely on you picking up the words over Hans Zimmer's soundtrack and like making sure that you're hearing everything correctly. He's like, no, I'm going to have them say it in some gobbledygook and put the fucking script in front of you so you take away the thing that's important.
He does that with the idea of the recurring motif of the paradise.
Yes.
He does that especially towards the end of the movie.
Yes.
Which we'll get to when we get to it.
Yep.
But I'm so glad you picked up on that. I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
So much of the iconic, important dialogue in this movie is subtitled and also delivered very, very well by all the actors. And apparently they hired a linguist to write this dialogue.
Hell yeah.
And they put a lot of work into it. They put a lot of work into the pronunciation and stuff like that. And I think it's really well done. In the book, the language is Arabic.
Yeah.
And I know that some people have an issue with that, and I think that's totally valid. But the Islamic appropriation in Dune is a really difficult subject that neither of us white dudes are really able to comment on. All I can say is just, I think the new language that they made was done really well and was cool.
And I also think Denis Villeneuve does a good job of subverting some of the most problematic elements of the book.
Yeah.
Right.
So we get more of Paul embracing the Fremen ways, and we have a couple amazing sequences, in my opinion, coming up. Let's talk about the sand riding scene.
Yes.
First, the Paul riding Shai Hulud.
Yes.
So I saw this in IMAX when I saw Dune Part 1. This was the preview clip at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, he's going to do it.
Yeah.
He's going to nail this.
Yeah.
This scene is so good. And this happens much later in the book. It's like one of the last things that happens in the book.
Yeah.
So putting it so early in the movie, I think, was a great decision and a great. This first part of the movie is the Fremen culture and Paul ingratiating himself and immersing himself into the Fremen culture, and so I think really focusing on putting all of that at the beginning of the movie was a great foundation to build things on later. So Stilgar and Paul. He's kind of given a speech to Paul before he goes out to ride the sandworm.
Yeah.
And he's like, don't do anything fancy. You're talented. We all know that.
Yeah.
Don't shame my teachings.
Yes. Yeah. I like Paul being like, oh, I won't. And he's like, hey, I'm serious or you will shame my teaching. Yeah, it's great. And I also like the Fremen, the kind of group. And it's actually the Chani's like best friend, Fremen character who we were talking about before, who like hollers at him and is like, hey, Muad'Dib. Oh, because he gets the name Muad'Dib earlier. We'll talk about the raid on the Harkonnen Spice Harvester.
Yeah, I forgot the order.
Yeah, we'll bounce back to that. It's totally fine. But she's like, hey, Muad'Dib, don't embarrass us. Call a big one. Which I love that line, and I also love that it like sets up the scene, right? Because he fucking calls a big one. This scene is so cool. the way that they do this, because in the book, you get a lot about how sand riding works, right? Like riding a worm. You get a lot of the biology and the physics of it, right? Explained to you by Frank Herbert, right? Where it's basically like, oh, you lift up one of the worm's scales and the worm doesn't like the feeling of the sand getting under the scale. So then it turns so that that scale is on top and it won't go back under the sand while that scale is lifted. And like all of that's explained to you by the world builder in the book, right? And in the movie, again, Denis Villeneuve just shows it to you, right? So like when Paul, he sets the thumper, we get the fucking horizon shots of the worm busting through dunes on its way, like disrupting the dunes on its way to him. And I love the fucking setup from just as the viewer to increase the tension and stuff. The setup from the Fremen of like, oh shit, this is a really big one.
Yeah.
Like immediately they're kind of like, oh fuck. Right. And the way it's shot is so good. I love all of the behind the back, like over the shoulder stuff where Paul's looking at the dunes and he's like walking to one side and then walking to the other side to try and track the movement of the worm. There's a point
where the worm disappears and you can kind of see Timothée Chalamet go like, well, where is it? And then it pops back up again. So he readjusts where he's walking.
Yeah.
A great little moment that builds tension for this scene.
It's awesome. It's awesome.
And then the worm like bursts through the dune that he's on, but the dune is so huge that he has to run, and we get these great overhead shots of him running across the crest of this dune to where the sand has started collapsing on top of this giant sandworm. And then he fucking jumps and like uses the hooks to slow his descent along like the collapsing sand dune. And it's all from his perspective. We don't get like once he jumps, we don't get a wide shot of him on the worm until he's actually stood up. We're just being pounded with dust and sand.
Right. It's like, you're experiencing it the way he is, right? Which is super cool. And I love, again, the stuff from the books being integrated where it's like we see what the hooks are doing, right? There's like all these shots of like the hooks raising up the scale on the sandworm, and there's like these vents underneath the scale, and we kind of see the worm adjust to like be like, I don't want to get sand in like under there, right? And it's like, even though nobody tells you that information in the movie, it's so beautifully just visually represented. And so eventually like he gets the worm to rotate, and then he fucking sticks the hooks in on like the left and right and stands up. And we get the swell of the kind of musical motif, right? The Kwisatz Haderach theme, sort of, right? And he's riding the worm, and we cut to the reaction shot of the Fremen. They're like all excited, and it's like it's such a powerful, intense, like emotional scene. And I think it's done really well, and I think the effects are great. I think it's awesome.
And all the Fremen start shouting "Lisan al Gaib."
Yes,
it is a huge moment in him starting to convert the Fremen. Or the Fremen starting to believe.
And there's like a shot of Javier Bardem too. Where he looks like he's like almost on the verge of tears, right? Because it's like the thing that he's been hoping for so long, right, is like right there in front of him.
We'll talk about the Harvester attack too, and then we'll talk a little bit more about we'll touch on Paul and Chani and just their relationship. Before we move on to the Harkonnens, which come into play later here, we'll kind of wrap up this opening act on Arrakis.
We will. But first, I must piss.
Poor water discipline. Justus, there's something about Denis Villeneuve and Spice Harvester action sequences, because this was the moment that I really locked into the movie, just like the Spice Harvester in the last one.
Yes, this sequence fucking rules. I love we can maybe just take a second, because I would rather call this out all at once than call it out all the times it happens in the movie. I love Harkonnen tech in this movie.
I love Harkonnen tech in this movie, Justus.
I
love the evil spice harvester
yes.
that looks like an evil octopus.
Yes, it's got like a big octopus head and like fucking spider legs, and then also the regular harvester like treads and shit.
Yeah.
I love that we see more of the harvesters in this movie, where we see like the front like little grabby things where they're like hitting the sand and like pulling the spice out or whatever the fuck. And then also I love Harkonnen ornithopters because the Atreides ornithopters are like dragonflies. The Harkonnen ornithopters are like wasps and bees. And there's like some that are that look like wasps.
Yeah.
And then some that look like bees and are like fatter and the wings are like up.
Yeah, Raban. I love Raban's fat bee ornithopter that shows up during his action sequence in the movie.
Like all of it, I'm like, this is all so fucking and immediately when I saw it in the movie, I was like, oh, these are Harkonnen ornithopters. We previously only saw Atreides ornithopters. And I was like, of fucking course they're like wasps and bees, and the Atreides ones were like dragonflies. Like, that's so obvious, right? And it's one of those things that feels so obvious that it's like, it's simultaneously like crowd-pleasing blockbuster filmmaking and also complete genius, right? Because it's like by the time they make the creative choice in the second movie, it feels like I should have known that already, you know, because of how well they set up the world in the first one, right? It like feels like a natural extension of the world, you know? And I was just like, that was one of the decisions in this movie where I was just like, they're really good at making these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also love the mounted guns on the ornithopters that fire.
Like
they fire and burst and also a spread.
Yeah.
So they can just spray and pray when they target the Fremen.
Yeah.
And the sequence is great. So it starts with the Fremen under the sand, and they have little breathing tubes that they can breathe out of.
We get some more Muad'Dib, the little kangaroo mouse. He's fucking adorable as shit.
Muad'Dib.
Yep.
And they jump out of the sand and they attack the harvester and start cutting dudes down.
Yeah.
Then the ornithopters show up and start shooting everyone.
Yeah.
And then they crawl under the harvester.
Yes.
Which is fucking insane.
It makes so much sense too what they're doing, because they crawl like underneath.
Yeah, like
that bit is fucking wild, right? And we like see that like the fucking spice harvesting like like equipment like all going around them, but then they come out the other side and they're doing this thing where they're hiding behind the legs.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's fucking genius. It's so smart. And there's no line of dialogue where they're like, hide behind the legs so that the ornithopter can't shoot at you, right? Like, they never tell you, right? But it's like so clear from how it is staged, right? That it's like, no, they're using it as cover, right? And it's like, duh.
Yeah.
You know? And I just love that Denis Villeneuve trusts the audience enough and trusts his own filmmaking enough to do that and never have anybody say it out loud.
Yeah.
You know, it rocks that it's just like, no, we did this action set piece well enough that you get what's happening. So we can spend more time on the action and less time on people explaining the action. It's so good.
Yeah. Chani has a rocket launcher and Paul's
Zendaya
helping her
with a rocket launcher, by the way.
Yeah.
Holy moly.
Oh dear.
I'm just saying. Maybe I sort of get it.
Yeah. Paul's helping her load it, and they're trying to shoot down the ornithopter, but it has a shield.
Yeah.
There's one point where a Harkonnen runs up behind her, and Paul yells at her, and she turns around and shoots the Harkonnen with a rocket launcher, and he blows up.
This rocks so fucking hard.
I really wanted to clap in the theater.
Yeah.
I really wanted to.
So did I. The moment where she turns around and fucking shoots the rocket, and it's great because these rockets are like timed or whatever, right? So it hits him and he flies back and he doesn't explode right away. And then he hits the tank tread and then explodes. It fucking whips. It's so good.
And then Paul runs out to be bait for the ornithopter, and then Chani blows it up.
I love that the leg moves at the last second when Paul's running out to be bait, and Timothée Chalamet, who just writ large, I think is good again in this movie. I think again, just like in the last one, there's a few moments of his performance where I'm like, okay, this guy's still growing as an actor. This maybe is not the best he'll ever be, right? I had a few of those moments in this movie as well as in part one. That being said, there's a lot of strong moments for him in this movie. And a moment that I love is as he's running to like be a diversion and the leg moves farther and he has to run farther. He goes, shit! It's a really good shit delivery.
Yeah. I'll save my thoughts on Timothée Chalamet for a little bit later.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
Because I have things to say.
Yeah.
Great fucking sequence.
Yeah, it's awesome. And then like lasers shoot the fucking harvester and it explodes into a giant fucking ball of fire.
And then they have a party afterwards where Paul decides that his war name is going to be Muad'Dib.
Yes, and he's also granted the Fremen name Usul. Base of pillar. Yeah, strong. And that's from the book.
Yeah, a great little scene.
Yeah.
So before we leave Arrakis and head to Getty Prime, we have some scenes throughout this opening act of the movie with Chani and Paul and their blossoming romance.
Right.
I think it's all built up and developed really well.
Yeah.
How do you feel about it?
I agree. I think a big part of this working for me is, and this is where I'm gonna come down very hard with, I don't think a hot take, but definitely one of my biggest takeaways from this movie. Zendaya can fucking act her ass off. I haven't really seen her in anything. I know she's in some of the Marvel Spider-Man movies. I haven't seen any of those.
She's good in those, but it's a very different character.
But she was sort of a revelation to me in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I think she is one of the best parts of it. I think she is a phenomenal actress, and I think she is doing the shit out of this role. One of the reasons that Paul and Chani's romance works so well for me is because Zendaya is so goddamn charming and so incredibly charismatic. And I believe everything that she is saying with her words and with her eyes through this whole movie. I think she really sells this. There's the scene with them on the dune where they're sitting on the dune. And I love the way she looks at him when he delivers one of the greatest lines of game that you can possibly lay down, which is, I would very much like to be equal to you. That line, I was like, smooth. Good line, Paul Atreides. Well, but she looks at him and I'm like, man, she is selling this for me right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think she does a fantastic job. I love this scene on top of the dune, and I love them talking about Paul's talking about the oceans of Caladan and rain on Caladan, and it's something that is a completely foreign concept to her. And
I love her. I don't believe you, Usul.
It's so, she delivers it so naturally and so
she's
charming.
Great.
She's great. And towards the end of the movie, she has to do a lot of acting without any dialogue. And her facial performance is so strong in the final act of the movie.
She nails a ton of stuff, in the last like 10 minutes of this thing with like a look.
When I saw it the other day, there were a few women around our age in the audience. The moment when Paul asks for Irulan's hand in marriage and it cuts back to Chani's look, a lot of them were like, no way. Like, I can't believe he did that.
Yeah.
Which it's good that performance is getting that reaction from people and people are that bought into the romance.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's developed really well. There's a lot of great scenes of them together.
Yeah.
As she teaches him about Fremen culture.
Yeah.
And,
I like her teaching him about the wind trap and him kind of just doing goo eyes at her.
And she's like, stop looking at me like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great. I think all of their stuff is it's well enough set up, right? They don't spend too much time on it. I think a downfall of a story like this is maybe making the romance an outsized focus, right? See the aforementioned Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones, a movie that sucks shit. But in this movie, I think they strike the balance really well and give you enough to care about, while not pulling focus from other parts of the story with this. Yeah.
Let's get off of Arrakis for a little bit and head to Giedi Prime.
Let's go to fucking Giedi Prime. My people. The balds of the universe have all collected on one planet.
I'm glad you said that and not the other terrible things that the Harkonnens are.
Oh, no. Just the bald thing.
Just the bald thing.
Just the bald thing.
Yeah.
No, all the balds of the universe have apparently collected on a single planet. It's just a planet of the balds. So in the first Dune, we see some Harkonnens, but they're basically all soldiers.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so the soldiers are all bald. Now we spend a significant amount of time on Giedi Prime and see crowds of Harkonnens, just presumably regular Harkonnen citizens who are just attending sporting events. Every single one of these motherfuckers has a shaved dome, which honestly makes me sort of root for the Harkonnens a little bit.
And they all apparently got a hold of H.R. Giger's concept art for the Jodorowsky Dune movie. And they also watched Triumph of the Will.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. It is definitely Space Hitler by way of H.R. Giger. Yeah. It is so basically what we're thrust into here on Giedi Prime to start with is and the setup for this, by the way, is we don't have to spend a ton of time on this, but there's been a couple of scenes with the Emperor and Princess Irulan already at this point. Princess Irulan played by Florence Pugh and the Emperor played by Christopher Walken. There's been a couple scenes basically of Princess Irulan being like, my father's been weird since the Atreides thing happened, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's another scene where she's basically talking to the Reverend Mother played by Charlotte Rampling, Florence Pugh is, and she's like, hey, like, do you think maybe this Muad'Dib that the Fremen are talking about that's been causing so much trouble for the Harkonnens might be Paul Atreides? Like, maybe he's still alive? And the Reverend Mother's like, shut the fuck up. I never want to hear you say that again. But the Reverend Mother is basically like, even if he is alive, like, we have other prospects for the Kwisatz Haderach. Like, there's other ways we can make this eventual plan happen. And one of those is this guy, Fade Rotha, which leads us into the scene on Giedi Prime.
Yeah.
Because they're talking about Fade Rotha and Florence Pugh is like, he's a fucking psychopath. And then we cut immediately to the scene on Giedi Prime so we can have that demonstrated for us, because what's happening is a gladiator match on Giedi Prime, right?
Let's talk about Austin Butler.
Yeah. Let's talk about Austin Butler.
So he has been had a really good career the last few years.
Yeah.
And this role, he's been getting a lot of hype and a lot of praise.
Yeah.
A lot of comparisons to your Heath Ledgers in The Dark Knight and such. And one of the people calling him one of the best on-screen villains since then.
Yeah.
What do you think?
David, I'm going to be real with you and I'm going to be real with our listeners. I'm going to drop a hot take here. I think Austin Butler sucks shit. I think he's bad. I have never seen him in anything else. I didn't see his Elvis movie. I haven't seen any of his other shit. In this movie, when he is suck shit is maybe unkind. I was maybe being unfair for the sake of dramatic effect there. However, I don't think he's good in this movie. I think when he is doing a brooding look or an intense stare, right? Or kind of that slack-jawed, psychopathic, like, I'm tilting my head like Michael Myers. All of that shit works totally fine. He has a totally good face for camera, right? Where it's like, you put a camera on this guy, you have him look intense, that is going to be effective enough. Anytime he has to open his mouth and say words, he sounds like he is trying to do an impression of Stellan Skarsgård as Baron Vladimir Harkonnen.
That's what he's intentionally trying to do.
And it sucks. And it sounds stupid and bad.
Okay.
It sounds stupid and bad and laughable. And it almost took me out of the movie a couple times. Now, I didn't hate it enough that I think he was irreconcilably bad casting or that this tainted the movie in any major way. However, if there is a weakness for me to poke at in this movie, it is named Austin Butler. I think he's bad in this movie.
Okay.
That's me. What do you think about Austin Butler in this movie?
I think he's fun.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
I don't buy into the best on-screen villains, Heath Ledger, whatever. He's not that good.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a lot of fun. And he's having fun in the role, and I like the silly voice. I love all just the weird, freaky shit he does, like kissing Baron Harkonnen.
Okay, yeah. So sorry, that rocks.
Yeah.
I just to be fair, like when Stellan Skarsgård and Austin Butler kiss not once but twice in this movie, a huge fan of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that rocks.
And I love him licking the knife.
Yeah.
I love him. I love his groupies that are apparently cannibals.
I like that as well. I like his cannibal groupies with the black teeth. I also like that he has black teeth.
Yeah.
Even when he's not in the photo negative sun.
Yeah.
But what I don't like is his line deliveries, such as "I brought spice production under control."
I think it was fun.
And I'm like, okay, I understand that that's how Stellan Skarsgård would say that line. How about we figure out how you would say that
I'm
line?
a big fan of silly voices in Dune.
Yeah, I know.
I love all the silly voices.
I like the silly voices. I just wish he had his own silly voice instead of just
fought well, Atreides.
doing
I like that.
Stellan Skarsgård's silly voice.
Yeah. Okay.
I wish he had his own thing.
I like
because Dave Bautista has his own thing.
Yeah. Dave Bautista's kind of doing his own thing. That's true. I like that he gets a Darth Vader cape at one point for no reason.
Yeah, that's true. That is fun.
But
anyway.
and I like the fight. I like his performance in the
Yes.
fight. I like how turned on he is by fighting people.
I will say, as much as I was just disparaging his performance, and mostly it's his line deliveries, just to be clear, his physical performance I think is pretty good. His fight choreo here is good, and yeah, I like when he's fighting the fucking Atreides guy who's not drugged, and like the weird gimp devil referees start intervening, and he's like, get back, and he's like pissed off that they're gonna like steal his triumph, right? Like that's all very fun. I enjoyed that quite a bit.
And I think this is a visually awesome scene in terms of the production design. And yet, like you alluded to earlier, the sun is black.
Yes.
And I guess that makes everything black and white.
Right.
And it's really just Denis wanted an excuse to shoot this scene in black and white.
And it turns the Bene Gesserit's robes from black to white when they move into it, which that effect looks so fucking cool. So they do it kind of twice. Once when Baron Harkonnen is going from like inside the building to like this outdoor arena, and it's like on Stellan Skarsgård like in his chair, and he gets wheeled like to the balcony, and you kind of see him like flesh toned, and then he like gets all washed out, right? But then they do it again with the Bene Gesserit, where they're like walking in their black robes, and as they walk into the sun, their robes turn white. It looks incredible. It's such a cool visual effect.
And we also meet Lady Margot Fenring, played by Lea Seydoux. Here she's watching Fade Rotha, and then after the fight, she finds him in a hallway in the Getty Prime Nightmare HR Giger mansion or something like that.
Yes, which by the way is being illuminated by Harkonnen fireworks, which are like they shoot like ink blots into the sky. These things are so fucking cool.
They're awesome.
The visual is amazing. I was obsessed with this the first time when we were watching it in IMAX. I was like, that is the coolest shit I've ever seen. It's so good.
Yeah. And this is basically Margot Fenring is a Bene Gesserit.
Yeah.
And she's trying to seduce Fade Rotha for reasons that are not clear to us at the start of this scene.
Yeah.
I love when she starts communicating with him telepathically.
Yes.
And getting him to follow her. And her mouth isn't, you can tell because her mouth isn't moving. And then the background of the scene behind him is out of focus, and it sort of starts like distorting and wobbling and wiggling.
Yep.
It's a great way to show the effect that the voice is having on
and
it.
then he like comes back too.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't recognize this place. Where are we? And she so disdainfully is like, this is the guest wing. Because it's like, this fucking bitch has never even been to the guest wing of his own palace. Like, he doesn't even know where the guests sleep. Yeah. But then she's basically like, hey, I'm going to my room. Do you want to follow me? And he does. And it's come here, kneel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Put your right hand in the box, bitch.
They get really close, and she's like, put your right hand in the box. And he looks down, there's a box, and then we see she's holding the gom jabbar in his neck.
Yep. It's really good.
It's really good.
Yeah.
How do you feel about Lea Seydoux in this? She has a very brief role. What do you think?
Anytime I see Lea Seydoux in a movie, I'm happy.
Okay.
She's great. I love her. I love her in this. I think that with there being no Count Fenring from the book in this movie, she's doing the heavy lifting in this Giedi Prime scene for 2 essentially, right? And I think she's great. I always love to see her. I think she was great casting for the role, and I love her little movement in this movie. Yeah.
She's very one note for me.
Oh, really?
In a lot of her roles.
Okay.
But I think this might be the best that I've seen her in.
Okay.
Like I think she does a solid job.
Better than Crimes of the Future?
I'd have to see Crimes of the Future again.
Okay.
I'm thinking of like her role in the James Bond movies is
gotcha.
really one
Yeah,
note,
yeah.
and a few other things that she's done.
Yeah.
But I think she's great, and the whole point of this is Fade Rotha is another potential candidate for the Kwisatz Haderach that the Bene Gesserit have set up, and she's testing him with the pain box. I love when they cut back to her reporting to the Reverend Mother, and she's like, he really likes pain.
Yeah.
So apparently for him, Fade Rotha had a good time with that pain box.
He had the right hand in the box and the left hand was on his wiener. Because he was enjoying himself. Yeah, and then she also is she's the bloodline is secured, female as you requested. So she is carrying Fade Rotha's daughter by the end of this interaction as well. Yeah, and I love this whole thing with the Bene Gesserit. I love Charlotte Rampling basically being like, yeah, I didn't administer the Gom Jabbar on him because I'm a motherly figure and he has a history with his own mother, right? And Florence Pugh's like, oh, what's that? And she's like, he fucking murdered her. Yeah. Before we fully get off the Harkonnens, it was earlier because basically like during all the Fremen shit that we talked about, Dave Bautista as Beast Rabban Harkonnen has been trying to fucking exterminate the Fremen and like bring spice production under control and shit. And there's a few great moments with Dave Bautista. Like I love him fucking bashing that dude's head into the control panel when he's like hearing shit that he doesn't want to hear. Like that's toward the beginning of the movie. But also there's a great moment before we go to Giedi Prime with Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, which is basically Rabban is like coming to bring in the bad news that Muad'Dib has been fucking hitting a bunch of Harkonnen spice operations, and they've been losing a bunch of men and like losing a bunch of spice, and we're outside the door of the fucking balsamic vinegar and olive oil bathroom that Baron Harkonnen has been in since he got poisoned in the last movie. We're hearing a bunch of screams from inside this room where Baron Harkonnen is with like his like servants or whatever. And I think you and I, when we saw this in IMAX, were thinking the same thing in this moment.
We were.
Where we were basically like, oh fuck, are they doing the thing where Baron Harkonnen is canonically a pedophile? Are there children in this room? And then when we open the doors of the room, it's just kind of like those more or less adult-looking servants who he has killed in rage. But there was definitely a moment where we were like, what's going on?
It's still awesome though. It's still pretty cool.
It rocks.
He's just floating.
He's floating naked.
You just see his ass. His big chunky old ass floating up.
Yes. And I also love the line as he's like going back into his fucking salad dressing pool where he's like squeeze harder, Rabban. Or like make them feel your grip or whatever, or feel mine on your neck.
So we go back to Arrakis. A big change that this movie has from the books is this whole plot of Jessica traveling south.
Yeah.
To unite the fundamentalist Fremen.
Yeah.
The South that we believe the Harkonnens believe is unpopulated.
Yeah.
It's also a very dangerous journey. There's a bunch of storms along the equator.
Yeah. That stuff is in the book. Like the storms on the equator and like the more Fremen in the South, and they think it's uninhabited and shit.
Yeah. But Jessica has a whole plot that takes place down there of her trying to unite the Fremen.
Right.
And I think Rebecca Ferguson does an incredible job in this movie, and I think she's fucking terrifying.
Yes, she's so scary in this movie. I also love that they're doing the thing that like it's like a joke when like couples or like friends or whatever are mad at each other, and it's like, oh, tell so and so that I say this, but the person is actually standing right there, but they're doing it with the unborn fetus of Aaliyah Atreides. So she's basically like, Paul's like, or Jessica's like, oh, your sister says that you're being foolish, right? And he's like, oh, well, tell my sister. And it's just very funny because they're playing a game of telephone with a between a grown man who's standing right there and then a fetus in a belly.
Yeah.
Which I love. But I also love when she goes to leave. She's like, well, she's basically like, you know, you'll eventually come south as well, and we'll be waiting for you, all of us. And she does like this creepy little voice where it's like her and Aaliyah and all of the Reverend Mothers, you know. I love that little bit. I love how freaky and weird it is. I love how they lean into that being a Reverend Mother is simultaneously like this very spiritual, powerful thing, but also like scary and fucked up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jessica is the villain in the books.
Yeah.
She's the reason everything happens. She sets all of this in motion. And making her a lot more of a sinister presence in this movie was a great decision to reinforce the themes. And I love some of the scenes that she has down in the South with the other Fremen.
Yeah.
Where they hear rumors of Muad'Dib, and she's like, "See, I told you."
Yeah.
You know, what isn't this what the prophecy said? Spread the word to the other villages.
Yeah.
And it is great acting from Rebecca Ferguson.
Yeah.
Watching it in the theater, it was a really powerful moment, and I think a great change that they made.
I agree.
To this movie.
Also, when Paul is having visions of what's going to happen when he goes south, he keeps kind of there's through the first half of the movie, he's having like kind of these prescient dreams of like, I follow somebody south and a ton of people die as a result, right? And as he has this dream more and more times, you like start to see that the person he's following is Lady Jessica. It's his mom, right? By the way, this guy who's starving to death in Paul's prescient vision, the main guy who's like on his hands and knees with like the gaping open mouth.
Yeah.
This guy looks like he's on the cover of a cattle decapitation album.
I was weirdly thinking like Prince of Egypt or something.
Yeah.
I don't like during like the Deliver Us
right.
sequence
or the plagues or whatever.
Yeah. That's the vibe that I got.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's having these apocalyptic visions of what happens if he goes south. And
by the way,
listeners,
maybe stay tuned for Prince of Egypt. Passover is coming
Passover's
up.
coming up.
Anyway.
Lent is almost over.
Yeah. Anyway.
He's having visions about what happens if he goes south, and he's trying to avoid that. But you know, Paul makes choices.
He does. Yep.
And
eventually one of his choices is to go south. Which so like Lady Jessica goes south. There's a cool scene after she goes south.
Yeah.
Where, well, first of all, the crossing on Shai Hulud is cool.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Where she's in like this basket, essentially this protective like pod that they have her on because she's the Reverend Mother, so she's like special, right? And all the other Fremen are just like, you know, out there with their fucking goggles and like wrapped up with their headscarves and stuff to protect against like the wind and the dust and stuff. But she's, you know, got this sacred little chamber, that woven basket thing. And I love them like bringing down the blinds as they're going into the sandstorm. And she's like, you know, the storms look bad. And the Fremen's response is, they're the guardians of the South, but Shai-Hulud is strong. And there's like the high aerial shot of Shai-Hulud just going into the storm with all the Fremen on its back. Fucking rocks. But when she gets there, I love the scene where she learns how the water of life is made.
Yes.
Okay. First of all, practical baby sandworm. It is not CGI. This is a motherfucking puppet that we are jostling around in the, like, when they're drowning the little baby sandworm, and when she's like calling it and grabbing on it
wraps around her.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a practical fucking puppet sandworm. 10 out of 10, no notes.
Yeah.
Perfectly done.
There's some CGI when we get a close up of its mouth opening.
Yeah.
But otherwise it's a puppet. Great fucking looking puppet.
Great puppet, amazing puppet. I was so happy that this was not a CGI fucking gobbledygook computer creation, and that like some fucking props artists like sat down in a workshop and fucking made this thing. It made me so happy. But yeah, I love this whole scene. I love whoever this actor is, who is kind of like the sandworm wrangler.
Yeah.
Right? The person who makes the water of life. Whoever this actor is phenomenal. I didn't recognize them from anything, but I was like, this person rocks.
Yeah, so how they make the water of life is they wrangle up a baby sandworm.
Yeah.
And they fucking drown it.
They drown it.
And extract the bile.
Yep.
Which is from the books.
Yep.
Fucking metal as hell.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yep.
And she tells the sandworm whisperer.
Yes.
That someday a man may come here to take the water of life.
Yeah.
And you have to give it to him.
Yep.
And she's like, but the water of life will kill him. It'll kill a man. And she says in the voice, do it. Like she's Emperor Palpatine. Do it. Do it.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
Great sequence. And I love that this movie just dives headfirst into the Fremen mysticism and mythology and all of the weird shit that Frank Herbert put into these books.
Yeah.
In a way that is still palatable for an audience to accept.
Yeah.
Again, something that doesn't feel diluted.
Mm-hmm.
It just feels like Denis really streamline a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
In a way for an audience to understand.
Yep. Yeah. I totally agree. Yeah, but I love all the stuff you were saying with Jessica in the South before as well, like all of her kind of preaching the word of the Lisan al-Gaib to the Fremen, like all that shit.
Yeah. There's a lot of other stuff that happens up in the north. We get an action sequence with Rabban heading out with a fleet of ornithopters to hunt down.
This is where we get some of
Muad'Dib.
the wasp and bee fucking Harkonnen ornithopters, which is great.
Yeah.
And I love them just bombing the shit out of this cliff face because they like detect movement or whatever. I also love Robin. There's like two guys in this ornithopter. There's like the guy wearing it's like covering his whole face and he's like monitoring for life signs or whatever.
I loved the goofy headset. I thought that was such a cool piece of tech.
Yeah, it's like a crazy goofy fucking VR headset or whatever that he's wearing. And then the other guy's like the pilot of the ornithopter. And like Rabban is getting pissed off because like the guy found life signs and then they like bomb the shit out of this cliff face. And he's like, he's not detecting anything, or he's like, I don't know, like where they went or whatever the fuck. And Robin just snaps this dude's neck. I also love that while they're flying the ornithopter, I love that they left this in. Because this would have been so easy to just cut out and nobody would ever know that they cut it out. The fucking Harkonnen puking from air. Yes, from air sickness.
So good.
That made me so happy. I was like, I fucking love that they just cut back to this ornithopter where there's Harkonnen troops like waiting, and this one guy just fucking hurls.
And they bomb the shit out of this cliff face. It causes a bunch of dust to kick up in the air. And so we have a lot of atmospheric effects with the dust, and the lighting's great here.
Yeah.
And so the Harkonnens land on top of the cliff, and they start getting picked off one by one.
Yeah.
And then we see Paul walk through the dust, and Rabban sees him and just freaks out and starts running away with twinky little Timothée Chalamet.
Yes, and like gets back on his ornithopter, like they take off, and there's like a Fremen who got on his ornithopter. And like almost fucking kills him like while he's in the air. Like Dave Bautista's like clinging on to the edge of the ornithopter, and this Fremen's like trying to fucking take him out. And I love that Raban doesn't even take this Fremen out.
Yeah,
this Fremen just gets lasered.
It gets lasered by one of the other Harkonnens. And Raban is just so freaked out by Muad'Dib.
Yeah, it rocks.
It's awesome.
It's a fun scene.
We also have a scene where we're reunited with our old friend Gurney Halleck.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Which, by the way, you did say in part 1 you were disappointed no Balasay, and you were disappointed that we were not referencing that we were pee-peeing and poo-pooing in those still suits.
Denny apparently listened to our episode.
He apparently heard our episode and included both of those things in 1 second of this movie, because Gurney Halleck is playing the Balasay and singing about how his still suit is full of piss.
He's working for smugglers that are smuggling spice, and they have their own harvesting operation, and they get attacked by the Fremen. And he's sitting up in the harvester playing his Balasay. We don't get a good look at it, but it is like a 9-string instrument.
Yeah.
I love that he's dressed in like stolen Sardaukar armor.
Yeah.
And he has the little like anti-gravity thing that the Sardaukar have, so he activates that to go down to the ground and guard the harvester while it's working.
I also love that the tune that he's playing on his Balasay is like kind of discordant and like minor key, like it's like kind of like a sour tune. I enjoyed that a lot, that it's not like a pretty little song he's playing. It's like, no, I'm fucking pissed off. My life is shit.
Yeah, he's really I love rough around the edges Gurney in this movie.
It's great.
And then the Fremen attack, and I love these mines these magnetic mines that are just like, it's just like a sheet of metal that is magnetically attracted to the harvester.
Yeah.
So they just start flying through the air and attaching themselves to the harvester and blow up.
Yeah.
And then the Fremen attack, and Gurney gets thrown on the ground by one.
Yep.
And it's Paul, and he says, "I recognize your footsteps, old man."
Yes, which I love that we're bringing that line back. And then they have the moment where Gurney takes off his helmet and Paul takes off his mask so that they can see each other's faces. And it's in the book, but the way they do it in the movie, I think, is really beautiful and almost brought me to tears when Josh Brolin says, you young pup," and they embrace. Because the "you young pup" is what he says in the book when he encounters Paul again, when he thinks he's dead. And it's just like, it's such a beautiful, like, heartfelt moment, and Brolin really sells it.
Yeah, Brolin sells the shit out of it.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy to see Gurney again. Gurney's one of my favorite characters.
Yeah.
And I love what they do with Gurney throughout this movie, where he kind of becomes the devil on Paul's shoulder.
Yeah.
He is like, he's starting to become, involved with the Fremen culture and learn more about the Fremen, and is like, what's, this prophet thing, like, why don't you use this?
Right.
We can get, Gurney is out for blood in this movie. He wants revenge against the Harkonnens.
Yep. And he does say the thing that we referenced, I think, in our Dune Part 1 episode, which is that he has a history with the Harkonnens, and Raban gave him the scar on his face, right? So he finally does mention that in this movie, which I think is fun that they threw in. But yeah, no, he's basically like, what are you fucking waiting for? You have an army, like, let's go get revenge, right? And in addition to having an army, he also has nukes. Which is basically the next big thing, probably.
Yeah.
I love. How did you feel about the atomic scene in the theater? Because this, for me, was one of the moments of this movie where I was like, oh, this, like, Denis got it. Like, this fucking rules. I don't know if it hit you the same way.
There's a meme on TikTok that is like CGI 3D videos of the insides of of guns.
Yeah.
Activating, like, you know, when what happens when you pull a trigger and fire a bullet.
Right.
Set to the riff of Mississippi Queen. And it's used for a variety of situations. When Gurney turned to Paul Atreides and says, "I know where your father hid the family atomics," with that little smile, I had one of those memes playing, but instead of a gun, it was a bomb.
An atomic bomb.
And I was like, let's fucking go. Let's violate the Great Convention, motherfuckers. Yeah, I think this scene, this moment, Denis fucking got it.
Yeah.
He totally gets it. They go to this vault, and there's like 90 or so warheads just stacked up.
Yeah.
These huge missiles. And I love the way Josh Brolin says this line with so much pride. He's like, the 90 original Atreides family warheads.
Yep.
Like, he's so proud.
Yeah.
It's great, and I think it's another moment in Paul's arc that this movie does a great job with.
Yeah. And I think weirdly, I feel like this scene benefited from Oppenheimer recently coming out in a weird way, because like while they're and one of the things that really sticks with me with this scene is, in order to get into the vault, Paul has to like scan his hand.
Yeah.
Right. And Gurney says like only with your genetic heritage. Right. And there is something so there is so much being said where it's like a fucking white kid has to stick his fingers into this like decoder box, right, in order to have 90 nuclear weapons suddenly immediately at his disposal, right? And then Josh Brolin saying like, this is real power.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas like what he's been doing is like making an alliance with the Fremen, right? And it's like there is something that Denis Villeneuve is saying about like, yeah, like the white savior thing being bad, like that critique, right, that we're doing is part of this. But also there is something to say about like, this is just a rich white kid, right? And it's like by the time that he meets Josh Brolin and gets the atomic weapons, he's already been doing this thing with the Fremen. But like, if all he had was the atomics, right, like that's maybe enough. And it's just virtue of his wealth and privilege, right? It's basically just like, oh yeah, like there is just this shortcut that you get because you're the Duke's son,
yeah,
right? And it's like, it feels gross and sinister. And I love that it feels gross and sinister because it should, right? And I think it's a moment where I was like, yeah, Denis gets it, right? He gets that Paul Atreides is not the hero here.
Right. And this is something that every house in the Imperium has.
Yes.
They have their own stockpile of atomic weapons.
Yeah.
There's this thing called the Great Convention that
right.
is very loosely deterring them from using it.
Yes. It's basically Frank Herbert commenting on mutually assured destruction.
Yeah.
Right? It's a thing that we live with in our real world every day. Is basically just some guy who is just a rich fucking asshole who bought his way into elected office is deciding not to end our world every day, right? And it's like this scene does such a good job of like, I feel like distilling that.
Yeah.
And
I think the other great thing about this moment for me is the dream of the Fremen is, one, to be free of oppression and tyranny.
Yeah.
And two, to turn Arrakis into a paradise.
Yeah.
And to change the environment and bring back trees and bring back water. And they are now set on a path towards a war,
right.
a nuclear war, that they really have no stake in, that isn't going to really benefit them, other than they are descending into religious fanaticism over Paul.
Yeah.
Paul said he was going to bring back a green paradise.
Yeah.
Not in this scene, but a little bit later. And he doesn't.
Right.
Right? It's not something that they're going to see in their lifetimes.
Mm.
They're going to be wrapped up in a war for years that they didn't, that they really had no stake in, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that when they get the nuclear weapons, right? The thing that they decide is most strategic to do with them, right, is to point them at the planet, right? We're going to fucking destroy the spice fields. We're going to destroy the resources of Arrakis.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, it's that thing where it's like, yeah, ostensibly this is to help the Fremen achieve their freedom. That's what Paul is telling the Fremen. Right. But it's like what he's actually doing is basically saying my lever here is I'm going to fucking destroy your planet. Right. You know, if they don't give me what I want. Right. And it's brilliant. And I just love the scene of them going and seeing the weapons. I also love the glow globe, just a cool little piece of fucking world building and production design, them like sending the little glow globe into the place and having it like illuminate.
Yeah,
all
we
of the
have
missiles and
quite a
shit.
few glow globes throughout these movies of different designs, and they're all fun.
They're fun. Anyway,
there's a little like robot ones that follow the Atreides around in Castle Caladan.
Yeah,
like it's cool stuff.
Yeah.
What happens is there's an attack on Siege Tabor. That's probably the next big thing that happens.
Yes, and because Feyd-Rautha is put in charge of Arrakis, and he smooches his uncle, and his uncle smooches him.
Yes,
as previously mentioned.
And he gets a Darth Vader cloak and starts routing out the Sieges, trying to look for Muad'Dib.
Yes, and he finds Siege Tabor and blows the shit out of it.
So now they're forced basically to go south. And again, Paul knows that if he goes south, he has this terrible vision that may come to pass.
Yes, a cattle decapitation album cover will happen.
Something out of the Old Testament, you know, a plague of Egypt type scenario.
Yeah.
So they head south, and Paul takes the water of life.
Yes. Yeah, he finally decides to basically agree to what Jessica has been trying to get him to do, which is become the Kwisatz Haderach, right? Finish his journey to becoming kind of the ultimate being, right? And he's been resistant to that because he was basically like, I'm going to find a way in the north. But once Siege Tabor is bombed, right, is assaulted by the Harkonnens, he basically feels like he has no choice, right? He's like, yeah, this is the path forward.
Yeah.
So he drinks the water of life.
And he attains prescience and sees the vision that he had much more clearly. He's following his adult sister.
Yes.
And over a sand dune that a really beautiful shot that I'm sure they found a location to do this in because it looks great.
Yes.
A sand dune that leads to a beach.
Yes.
And Anya Taylor-Joy turns to the camera.
Yep.
And says, I love you, Paul.
Yes.
And she has like 5 seconds of screen time.
Yeah. And there's not really much we can say about her performance because she's barely in the movie.
But that's Denis saying, hey, stay tuned for Messiah.
Yes. I like the idea that she'll be able to play Aaliyah Atreides in the sequel.
Yeah.
I'll be interested to see that.
And he also realizes that the Baron is his grandfather.
Yes. Which then so then he's dead from the water of life, sort of, right? And this is not in the book. They invented this for the movie, as far as I can tell. But Chani's Fedaykin, which is like a Fremen warrior, her Fedaykin name is like Desert Spring. It translates to Desert Spring. And apparently there's something in the prophecy about how the Lisan al-Gaib will die and be resurrected with Desert Spring tears. So she sort of willingly plays her own part in the... Well, not really willingly, because Jessica uses the voice on her, actually. Yes. But she plays her own part in the prophecy here, where she starts crying because Paul is seemingly dead. And then she combines one of her tears with a drop of the water of life, puts it on his lips, and he like wakes up. So it's like fulfilling the prophecy. This is not in the book. I thought it was kind of a fun little addition and gave her character a little bit more to do in this portion of the story.
And it's another little step on that journey of converting the Fremen.
Yeah.
That I think it's done really well.
Yep.
You know, there's a great reaction from all of the actors and Javier Bardem when this happens. And Paul wakes up and you immediately get the sense that he is changed.
He's different. Yes. In the same way that Rebecca Ferguson, who we already talked about, is so great and scary in this movie, she's also different right after the Water of Life, right? The Water of Life changes both of them noticeably in this movie, which I think is a strong choice, right? Where it's like, oh, by getting all of this knowledge of everyone who came before, right? It kind of makes you not you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You sort of become somebody else or something else, right? Which I love. Yeah.
And and Paul realizes that the Baron is his grandmother, or he kind of looks like a grandmother. And Paul realizes that the Baron is his grandfather.
Yeah.
He was the father of Jessica, and Jessica didn't know either until she took the water of life. First of all, Baron Harkonnen fucks.
Yep.
Second of all, hey Denis.
Oh shit! Wait,
I noticed.
Hold on, shut the door. We explicitly disinvited George Lucas from this recording. Oh, he's forcing his way in. Fuck. Our George, you can say one thing. You can say one thing, George. Okay. We heard enough from you last episode.
All right. Well, I'll say one thing and then I'll go back to Skywalker Ranch and my $1 billion. So. I was watching this movie and I realized that this is the second movie in a trilogy, right?
Yes.
Denis wants to make he makes his third one?
That's right, George.
Yes, George, you're right. It's really funny how the main character gets a revelation about his parentage or his heritage that he finds out he's related to the villain. And I've been seeing reviews of this movie that compare it to Empire Strikes Back, which is a Star Wars movie. I made that movie just in case you didn't know. And, I was watching this movie and I was like, God damn it. That's kind of similar to something that happens in Empire Strikes Back.
Hold on. George, I'm going to stop you right there. George, this is from the book. The book Dune, I'm sure you're aware. was written in the 1960s, George. So any similarity between this and one of your Star Wars movies, I do have to specify the source material predates Star Wars 1977 and definitely predates Empire Strikes Back, which again, I'm sure you know because I am confident that you, George Lucas, have read the book Dune by Frank Herbert.
I don't know what you're talking about.
God damn it. Get him out of here. Get this fucking guy
Denis, I'll see you in court, you motherfucker. George, get the fuck out of here.
Sorry, folks. We're not going to let him in again. He's banned. He's got a lifetime ban from this podcast.
I really like that this revelation happens here. As opposed to when it does in the book, which is during the tent sequence when Paul starts having his prescience awake, that takes place in the first part of the first movie.
Yeah,
it takes place in the first movie. They move it to here.
Yeah,
because I think it works more symbolically here.
Yeah,
because now Paul is becoming like a Harkonnen.
Yes,
right.
Yeah. Yep.
So he's embracing that darker side of his past,
right? That
darker side of who he is. And I wanna step back for a second. I want to talk about Timothée Chalamet.
Yeah.
You were not hype on Timothée Chalamet in the last one.
I think he's fine.
You think he's fine?
Yeah.
And in this one, did you like him a little bit more, or?
I think I maybe
I know you mentioned it a little bit.
Yeah, I think I maybe like him slightly more in this one, but I still sort of think he's fine. I wasn't blown away by his performance. I wasn't like Timothée Chalamet is a revelation, right? I was like, he's getting the job done. He's doing what the role needs him to do. I was more impressed by other actors in this movie. Rebecca Ferguson stands out to me. Zendaya stands out to me. Javier Bardem stands out to me. Timothée does not as much. He's doing a hell of a lot better than Austin Butler. But I think he's serviceable for me. I don't necessarily think that he is I wouldn't if he was nominated for Best Actor, right? At the next Oscars, I'd be like, all right, like, let's calm down.
Okay.
That's kind of how I feel about him. Yeah.
Timothée Chalamet is a revelation.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Timothée Chalamet is the standout performance in this movie for me.
All right.
I was so happy watching him become Paul Atreides, become Muad'Dib, become the Kwisatz Haderach. He crushes it in this fucking movie, and I had hopes, but that first one, it's the beginning of his journey. He has to play the character a little bit more timid and sort of slowly grow into becoming an adult and becoming the Duke. And here, I think he does Paul Atreides' arc so much justice. Yeah. And this is what had to work, right? You have to believe that Paul Atreides is turning into a monster.
Right.
And Timothée Chalamet puts that task on his back and carries it over the finish line.
I do agree that he executes that successfully. Yeah. And the big thing is in the scene that comes most immediately after this, which we can tie into this conversation.
Yes, it's the council.
Yes, when they've gone, so we're in the South, he's taken the water of life, and then now, we're doing the war council, and he's addressing basically all of the Fremen. Yeah. And this scene, I will say, despite not being quite as enthusiastic about this performance as you are, this scene is a very good piece of acting from him. And he's delivering it all in this made up language, right? Mm-hmm. It's primarily subtitled. But yeah, he's doing kind of this impassioned, he's stirring them into a religious fervor, right? Yeah. So he's doing this very this very aggressive, impassioned kind of rant, prophetic rant. Right. And it works very well. It's very effective.
There's a moment where he looks at just a random Fremen that's in the crowd.
Yeah.
And tells him, like, your grandmother got a scar or something. They lost her eye when she was 12.
Yeah.
Crossing on Shai Hulud. And the Fremen breaks down and goes, Lisan al-Gaib, and everyone starts going like that.
Yeah.
And he's stirring the crowd into a fervor. There's an incredible bit of acting from Javier Bardem where he looks at Paul and he says, tell us what you've seen in your visions.
Yeah.
And Paul says, a green paradise. And Javier Bardem looks like he's about to weep with tears of joy.
Yes. Yeah.
And the blue in blue eyes effect is really well done throughout this movie.
It is.
But you see like this glimmer, this glint in his eyes as he hears Paul deliver these words.
Right. It's exactly what he hoped the Lisan al-Gaib would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is the point where Paul wins over the Fremen.
Yeah.
Where he's completely
and I love
convinced them that he's the Messiah and he's believing it himself.
I love him embracing the title. I love him saying, like, in this monologue that he has him saying, I am the Lisan al-Gaib. Like, I am the voice from the outer world. Right? And him finally, because throughout the rest of the movie, he's been denying that. He's basically being like, no, I'm not a Messiah. I'm not a savior. I'm just here to help. Right. And this is the first time where he takes the mantle on and is like, no, that's me.
And I, and I can kind of interpret his struggle with that. He is partially struggling.
Yeah.
But he also knows that, like, being humble and being honest with the Fremen is going to get him power over them.
Which there's a lot of great moments of him of that working in this movie, right? Where there are the moments, and they're played a little bit for comedy, right? Where Stilgar is talking to, like, the older members of the Fremen society who are, like, the Lisan al-Gaib, like, true believers, right? And being like, oh, the Lisan al-Gaib is, like, too humble to say he's the Lisan al-Gaib, of course, right? And I love all of that shit earlier in the movie. It's all so great. And it works as comedy, but it also helps play into this big moment here later in the film, right? Because it set the stage for it effectively. Yeah.
And he's saying, I am the Lisan al-Gaib. I'm the voice from the outer world. I am Paul Atreides, Duke of Arrakis. And I think Timothée Chalamet sells the shit out of this character. I think he does fantastic work in this film.
Yeah.
And, if he got nominated for Best Actor, I might be pulling for the kid.
Okay. All right.
We'll see.
All right. I think this bit here, I think it's effective. I think it works for the movie. I think for me, it is a little bit of a showy performance, right? Where it's a little big and bombastic and yelly, right? And I know that he's addressing a crowd of a bunch of people and he's trying to sway them over to his cause. There's an acting coach buried a little bit deep within me.
Sure.
That in this scene was like, let's find some levels. Sure. You know, like this kind of feels a little one note. Like, let's find some levels here.
I think,
you know?
and I think he does in the rest of the movie.
Right.
I think he, the moment when he walks into the Emperor's like camp that he set up.
Yeah.
He is the physicality in his performance, and of course the costuming and everything like that. He is a completely changed Paul Atreides from that little boy that we met back in Caladan.
True. Which, by the way, we might as well more or less get there, because pretty much what happens after this scene where he's talking to them about being the Lisan al-Gaib, we're basically gearing up for the final battle at this point. They head back north, right? Yeah. And they get the atomics, and we're battle planning, right? That he sends a message to the Emperor, basically being like, yo, I'm Paul Atreides, and guess what? I lived, bitch.
Muad'Dib.
Yeah.
We gotta go to Arrakis and deal with this Paul Atreides.
I'm gonna leave the walk-in impression to you because yours is good and mine.
Oh, thank you.
Mine would not be good.
I've never feel like I had a great walk-in.
Nobody has a great walk-in, but you have a good walk-in.
I have a disdain and a dislike and a distaste for people who make their internet persona. I can do impressions.
Right.
So I really try not to do it, but there's a couple that I really want to get right.
Yeah.
One is Schwarzenegger.
Right, of course.
The other one is Werner Herzog.
Yes. You must never listen to this.
You must never listen to this. It was not a significant bullet. Herzog's so fucking hard to get right.
Yes. I would like to see the baby.
I would like to see the... Well, that's yeah. That's a good one. So I haven't really worked on my walk-in at all.
Yeah.
But yeah. The Emperor arrives and builds a camp. And then fucking Paul Atreides and the Fremen attack.
Yeah, I love the Emperor's fucking mirror ball ship.
Yeah.
It looks so cool.
It looks dope.
The shot of it like ascending into the atmosphere of Arrakis and then like hovering over Arrakeen and it like just mirroring everything below it on the surface of the planet is fucking incredible. It looks so cool. It's good shit. Yeah. They set up like a little glass pyramid.
That's from the book.
Oh yeah.
I finished the book last night and I was like,
forgot about that.
They have the Emperor's little forward camp. Because in every other adaptation, it's like, we'll just do it at the Arrakeen throne room. But nope, it's from the book. And I think it looks great.
Yeah.
And the army spreads out. There's a great walk-in line at some point in the movie where he's talking to Florence Pugh and he goes, "You underestimate my Sardaukar." That's one more walk-in I got.
Okay, so
should we just talk about walk-in?
Yeah, let's talk about walk-in. I didn't know what to expect from Christopher Walken as Padisha Emperor Shaddam the Fourth, Carino, whatever his fucking official name is.
Yes.
He works for me so well in this.
I thought when I heard it was announced, I was like, okay, cool. My other thought was, oh, that's stunt casting for sure.
Right.
And I totally expected him to be like Muad'Dib.
He does definitely deliver at least one Muad'Dib.
There's a couple walk-in lines, but it's a very understated performance.
Yes.
And it reminds you like this is Christopher Walken, not I need more cowboy Christopher Walken. This is the Deer Hunter.
Yes.
And that fucking crazy performance as a James Bond villain in one of the worst James Bond movies.
Yeah.
And The Dead Zone and a lot of great old school walk-in roles.
Yeah.
And, maybe he doesn't know shit about Dune. Maybe he just kind of read his lines. I thought he really worked.
I think he rocks. I kind of like Elder Statesman Walken too. He's getting up there in years. Mm-hmm. And he's got like a lot of like, he's got a lot of the like, I have the gravitas, I have the I have enough mileage under my belt, right? That I don't have to like take this up to a 10 ever, right? He's basically just like, no, yeah, I can kind of glide through this thing and it will be more effective than if I am popping off in moments, right? So I kind of like that he sort of plays the whole thing as kind of gentle,
Yeah.
It really works for me.
And
I think he's great in this.
And I also really like his costuming.
Yeah,
his
me
costuming's
too.
very simple, and that's a really interesting contrast for the emperor of the known universe.
There is a moment when he's sitting on the throne, and it reminded me of like an album cover from the band Death. Right?
Where he's the skeleton on screen, bloody gore.
Right. He's sort of like kind of hunched on the throne a little bit, and it looks like he's like gripping it like for dear life, right? He's sort of basically like it's almost like he's holding this thing down. And I get so much intensity from him physically that doesn't come out like verbally, which I think is a strong choice for this character, right? Where it's basically you get that the stakes are high for him physically, right? But when he speaks, it's all pretty measured and pretty gentle.
Yeah, I agree. So we have our climactic battle sequence here.
Yes. Let's just talk about the whole damn thing.
Yeah.
Right? Because like this basically starts with Paul and his kind of war leaders, right? His battle commanders, right? Which is Gurney, Chani, and Stilgar, right? They're doing some planning. I fucking love when we have a map out and we're pointing at shit and being like, you're gonna fucking take your troops here and you're gonna go there.
And they're using like rocks to represent different points on the map.
Yeah. So basically like, Chani's leading kind of like the northern fighters. Gurney's gonna fucking take a contingent to like take the city of Arrakis, and Paul's gonna lead the fucking fundamentalist troops from the south. Like right into the emperor's throne room, basically. And they also nuke the shield wall.
Yes.
Which so the battle planning ends. Paul goes onto this cliff. This was a thing that was like a big moment in the trailers and stuff too. So I had already seen this moment, but it plays so well in the movie when he like walks over this ridge and you just see like thousands of Fremen. Right. And he does the long live the fighters, and they all are with religious fervor, with like rapturous joy, just like, yeah, like we're going to take our promised land.
Yeah.
Right. From these overlords. Right. And then the nukes fly into the shield wall. We get an amazing fucking explosion. Right.
Yeah.
And hell breaks loose, and they timed it with a sandstorm. So a sandstorm is also blowing in.
A great grandmother of a sandstorm, as Stilgar says.
Yeah.
And we got sand riders on the sandworms.
Yeah.
Waving the Atreides flag.
Oh, and I love the design of the Atreides flag because I love that it's a Fremenized Atreides flag. Yeah. So there's kind of this border around it that looks like a lot of the other Fremen artwork and designs and fabric and stuff that we've seen elsewhere in both of these movies. It's recognizably Fremen, right? But then it has the Atreides eagle in the middle of it, and I love the way that it looks recognizably both Atreides and Fremen at the same time. The design of it is really good. Yeah.
This was a sequence that was hinted at in the trailers, but seeing it in IMAX still just like you really feel it in your gut, which is the Sardaukar are outside and this storm is approaching.
Yeah.
And then you just see the sandworms emerge from the sandstorm and just start decimating the Sardaukar.
Last night when I saw this in the theater for the second time, if anything, even though it wasn't IMAX, if anything, this played even better the second time in the theater.
Desert fucking power.
It is when those three beautiful, majestic sandworm mouths, those majestic buttholes go through the fucking sandstorm cloud and descend upon the Sardaukar. Again, it's the thing I was talking about in the first Dune episode, where the scope of the worm is the size of it. is so well depicted in these movies, right? Where it's like the Sardaukar have been built up, right? Rightfully so, as like a very formidable force.
And they're shown to be that in the last movie.
Right. And I do love, by the way, that so they've been built up as this formidable force, and yet they turn tail and run when these things come out of the storm, because they're that fucking big and godlike and unstoppable, right? It's like you can't fight this thing. It is a force of nature, right? But I do love that, and I clocked it both times I've seen this movie so far. There are some Sardaukar who turn tail and run. There's like one Sardaukar who you can kind of clock, who like has his sword at the ready, and he's like, I'm gonna fucking take this worm off. And I'm like, kudos to that, props to that guy. He is top of his class at Sardaukar school, because even in the face of Shai Hulud, he's like, maybe I can kill this thing with a sword. I imagine things do not end well for that guy. He's going down that worm gullet. But yeah, like just the visual here is incredible. The worms kind of advance on the camera, and the camera sort of goes into one of the worms' mouths, right? As they're advancing on the Sardaukar. And it's just it's a fucking banger of a visual. It's so good. It's one of those blockbuster moments of grandiosity that you're like, yeah, even though Dune is like a little bit of a headier, more intellectual, less fun and games sci-fi than like Star Wars, for example, right? You get those moments where you're like, yeah, this needed to have hundreds of millions of dollars of budget and be put on IMAX screens, right? Because there's moments like this where it's like, to get the full kind of emotional payoff of the story, it needs to feel this epic. And it feels so epic. It's incredible. It's so good.
Yeah. This is a sequence that entirely happens off screen in the books. It's described later. And so I was watching it the first time, and I was a little disappointed that it wasn't longer. Like, I want and there's great sequences throughout this, obviously, like great moments throughout this battle sequence, but I was like, really drag this out and make this longer. And then I watched it the second time. I'm like, no, this is perfect.
I agree.
Because the point here is we need to get to the conclusion of Paul's character arc.
Yes. The fight with Feyd-Rautha is more important than the Fremen defeating the Sardaukar.
And, the moment when they're attacking Arrakeen later, where Gurney and Raban fight, both of us were watching that like, let's fucking go. And then Gurney kills him in like 2 seconds. But it's fine.
Yes.
Because the fight with Gurney's not the fight between Gurney and Raban's not the point.
I agree. However, watching the movie, even for the second time, I was like, they could have done 5 more seconds of this fight. Like, both times, and it's not a huge gripe with the movie. I'm not holding it against the movie, because you are right. They don't need to spend more time on it, and it's okay that they didn't. Both times I was like, but I kind of want to see Brolin and Bautista throw down for like 5 more seconds. Like and that's maybe one of the deleted scenes that Denis not going to reveal, is just a longer version of that fight, because I feel like there was a longer version of that fight at some point, especially the way it's cut, where they're kind of advancing on each other. Bautista takes out the whip, and then we sort of cut to like a close-up of him stabbing him in the neck, right? And I'm like, I feel like we cut out some shit.
Yeah, they definitely build up to it for sure.
Yeah. And again, I think it's fine. Very minor gripe with the movie for me, where I'm like, I kind of want to see Gurney Halleck and Beast Reba and throw down like a little bit more.
And there's also a sequence where Chani is in armor and taking out a bunch of Sardaukar, and it mirrors the flash forward or the dream that Paul had in the first movie, where he was in the armor, and this one it's Chani, and the armor looks much better, by the way. It's not a CGI monstrosity.
Wisely, they opt not to go the Iron Man armor route. Yep. Yeah.
But she kills a bunch of dudes, and it's really sick.
It's great. I love the tracking shot of her just like tracking her through the battlefield, and her kind of taking all these guys out. You kind of don't realize it's her immediately. We're sort of following this Fremen fighter, and then like the longer you follow her, the more you're like, oh, that's Chani. me, right? And eventually she kind of turns toward the camera and you get like her full face. But yeah, I think that that's all really cool and good. Before the battle starts, by the way, we should mention we were talking about Walken's performance. There is a moment in the throne room that we sort of glossed over because we were talking about Walken as an actor in this movie and not so much the events.
The spice
yes
must flow.
But he does have the Baron groveling here for a second.
That's my last Walken.
You can walk in as much as you want to, my friend.
Hey guys, can I come hang out with you and Christopher Walken? George, fuck off, man.
George, it's 9:30 on a Monday night, man. Don't you have somewhere else to be? Don't you have like a home? Do you have a family? What are you doing at my house? How'd you get my address? Anyway, the Baron is groveling here a little bit before the fighting breaks out. And I do love, he's got like a life support system. From him getting poisoned. He's got kind of this thing that's like hooked up to him that's like keeping him alive. And when he's groveling before the Emperor, one of the Sardaukar just like fucking cuts his tubes and he's like choking and fucking dying. And I love, there's a shot of him sort of dying and he's looking up at the throne and just kind of crawling toward, like with his last breaths.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm gonna sit on that fucking chair.
As I think this is as the attack is happening and everyone's focused on the door. He's like, I'm gonna get it.
Yeah, I'm gonna get in that chair. But he's like too weak and he's like dying, so he doesn't even really make it. But I love that because in the book, Aaliyah Atreides kills the Baron.
Yes.
Which because we have removed that character from this movie entirely, pretty much, we don't have that happen, right? And I like that the way that they end up killing the Baron is sort of a two-hander between like the Emperor kind of betrays him and also Paul comes in to finish the job.
Yeah,
right?
Paul comes in to stab him in the neck.
Yeah.
And this is another, I think this is great acting for Timothée Chalamet.
Yeah.
Doing most of this dialogue in the Fremen language that they came up with.
I also think it's a great visual with Paul and his Fremen coming into the throne room because they come through, they've basically been blowing the fuck up, blowing this pyramid the fuck up right outside. And so there's like dust and smoke and stuff. And when they come through the doors of the throne room, all the dust and smoke sort of comes in and is like engulfing them as they're walking in. So they're kind of like concealed in like the dust from the sandstorm as they're entering. And it is sort of a moment of like the desert is entering the throne. Like the desert has arrived in the Emperor's throne room.
And even just the way that Paul has a cloth wrapped around his head.
Yeah.
He looks like a Fremen fighter. He doesn't unwrap it. He doesn't reveal himself.
Yeah.
He feels like he is fully one of the Fremen now.
Yeah.
He feels wild and dangerous and dark, and again, a very stark contrast from the little boy on Caladan that we knew.
And without even dignifying the Emperor or any of the Sardaukar with even acknowledgement, he just walks right up to Baron Harkonnen, right? Who's like fucking suffocating on the stairs and just stabs him in the fucking neck.
And he says, "Grandfather, you die like an animal."
It rocks.
It goes so hard.
It goes so hard. It's a great moment and a great death for Baron Harkonnen. And you know, Stellan Skarsgård has fucking eaten this shit up for 2 movies.
We haven't talked about him much in this, but there's more of him in here,
and he's great again.
He's great in all of it.
Yep,
he's so fucking good.
I do want to, since we're now just kind of sort of taking a second on Baron Harkonnen, I do want to bounce back and talk about how on Yeti Prime, at one point, he's in a hot tub smoking a huge hookah. Yeah. Which, when we saw it in IMAX together in the theater, there was a moment where I could tell that both of us were honing in on that, where we were like, that's just a really fucking fat guy in a hot tub smoking a huge hookah, and that's pretty fucking dope. He's kind of living the life.
He's kind of my problematic fave.
Yeah.
He is a pedophile, but he kind of rules.
But also, to be an enormously fat man in a hot tub smoking a giant hookah.
I just need a hot tub and a hookah, and I'm there, man.
Yeah, it rocks, and his death rocks. It's all great. Yeah. So yeah, he kills the Baron.
He orders them to capture the prisoners and give the Baron to the desert. We get a great shot of the Baron's body in the desert with ants crawling over it.
Yeah, like ants crawling into his ears and shit. Like it's the head from Hereditary on the side of the road. Yeah. It rocks. And then so then Paul is like in that's when we like cut to them taking over.
This is
Arrakeen.
when they attack Arrakeen, and we have the brief exchange between Rabban and Gurney.
Also, a lot of great, again, like we're tracking the ornithopters. They're like shooting down at the Harkonnen and Fremen fighters as they're kind of like crossing swords on the battlefield.
It's nighttime now, and there's like fires everywhere and stuff. Yeah. It's very reminiscent of the destruction of Arrakeen from the first movie.
Yeah.
I think it's a great little visual sequence. Part of me wishes that it was longer, but still, I think the important thing is to get to the knife fight.
Right, which is basically the next big thing, right? Like the other houses of the Landsraad, the other great houses, arrive on Arrakis. Because they've been summoned, right? Paul summons them, I think. This is like a calculated thing where he's like, call the great houses here. And they show up and he's like, okay, it's time. Like, go get the prisoners. And he basically confronts the Emperor and is like, you betrayed my father. I have beef with you. Fight me 1v1. And Christopher Walken is like, but I'm old. So I need somebody to fight in my stead. See, my Walken is not good. Your Walken is good. And so Fade Routh is like, I like stabbing. Here I am. And I love that his response to this when Paul asks the Emperor for a champion. Fade Rotha. I always want to say Fade Routha.
Yeah.
Because in the book, it was Fade Routha.
Everyone says it.
Yeah.
But it's Roth in the movie. Whatever.
Fade Rotha. I love that his response is, I'm here, Atreides. I need a blade. Pretty badass. And he gets like the Emperor's knife, right? And then they throw down. It's rad.
Paul says, may thy knife chip and shatter. And Fade Rotha kind of does like oh, that's pretty cool. I'll say it back. May thy knife chip and shatter.
I do love his kind of confused look where he's like, I don't know what the fuck that means, but I'll say it too.
This fight kicks ass.
It's great.
This is some of the best choreo in between these two movies.
And I thought, so like in the book, the fight between Paul and Fade it's an important thing. It's the climactic set piece even in the book. But in the book, it's not. Paul is never as close to losing as he gets in the movie, and to the point where when we were watching this movie for the first time, because they're throwing down. Fade is like a worthy competitor for Paul. He's like kind of matching him, right? And there's a great moment where Fade and Paul like kind of grapple, and one of them gets kicked in the face, right? And they kind of split apart for a second, and Paul looks at Chani for a second, and Fade goes, oh, is this your pet, right? And then he is basically, because he thinks he's gonna win the fight, right? He's like, any special attention for the pet, right? Like anything I should do for her when you're fucking dead. And that like really makes Paul pissed off. But then after they kind of re-engage after that, Paul gets stabbed. He gets stabbed in the side, and then like towards the end of the fight, which we can talk about in more detail in a second, he got stabbed in the shoulder. But as this was happening, I, as a viewer the first time when we were watching this at the IMAX screening, I was like, oh, this is like a prescient vision of Paul seeing how he could lose the fight, and then we're going to cut back and it's going to be the beginning of the fight, and he's going to easily take down Fade, because what we're seeing here is him losing, like because he was doing so poorly and like had gotten wounded. I was like, oh, this isn't the real fight. Like we're going to snap back to reality here in a second. And it wasn't that, which that just goes to show how effectively this scene is like so like tense and like makes you believe that the hero might not prevail here. Because even I, a person who has read the book and knows how this is going to end, I was like, this can't be how this fight goes, right? Because it's like he can't get stabbed. He can't almost die, you know? And so I thought it was just genius how they did it.
Yeah.
Because I didn't, even as a book fan, it had me on the edge of my seat. I didn't know what was coming next.
There are numerous points in this movie where I have that reaction too.
Yeah.
I've read the book. I know what's happening, and yet I don't know what's coming next.
Right.
And I think Denis does a great job, wringing that tension out of the audience.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is one of those scenes as well, where Paul gets stabbed twice, and it's like, you wonder what's gonna happen to him.
Yeah.
And then I think he pulls the knife out and pulls Fade Routha in, and as Fade stabs him in the shoulder, he stabs Fade as well, just like the fight with Gurney Halleck in the training room.
It's a callback to the first movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. An excellently done callback.
Yeah. It's really, really good. When it happened in the theater.
There's another callback. Holy shit.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No,
there's another callback.
Yeah.
Paul starts beating his chest like Jamis does.
Yes.
In the Jamis fight. And I think ending both movies with knife fights that are key elements in Paul Atreides' arc was another great kind of George, I told you to leave. David, I think you're about to say it's like poetry. It rhymes. George, I swear to fucking God, get out of here. This is the last time.
George, I'm going to call the police. I'm gonna have you escorted out of here.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, but before I was rudely interrupted. It's like poetry. It rhymes.
Yeah. Yes.
We gotta get a restraining order against that fucking guy.
that fucking frog-necked little freak. Anyway. But yeah, and I love Fade going to stab him in the shoulder and Paul grabbing the knife, and then the knife is like cutting through his glove and like into his hand as he's holding it, like trying to hold it off. There were people in our IMAX screening who were like audibly squirming when that was happening. Mm-hmm. When he was like holding the knife, like there were a few people who were like, oh, which was great. It rocks. It's such a good fight. Really well done. And again, like we've been talking about, good that we didn't spend a shit ton of time on the other stuff leading up to this, because this is the climax of the movie. And it feels that way because the other stuff isn't given tons of time.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
And so Paul defeats Fade Routha. Fade says, you fought well, Atreides, which he said in the arena as well.
Yes. In his best Stellan Skarsgård, you fought well, Atreides. Yeah.
And then Paul goes over to the Emperor and has his ducal ring on.
Yep.
And he says, "Kiss that ring, motherfucker."
But I love that he doesn't
say it.
Actually say anything.
He doesn't even use the voice.
He doesn't use any words at all.
He stamps his foot.
Yeah.
And that gets Christopher Walken to bend over and kiss the ring.
Which, by the way, and I don't know if this is just me overthinking Denis Villeneuve's movie, but him stomping, there is something about that sound that it's reminiscent of a thumper.
Yeah.
It feels like Paul is, because Shai Hulud is the god to the Fremen.
Yeah.
Right? It feels like a godlike expression of power when he just stomps and makes that like resonant thud, right? Because this is a sound that we associate with the sandworms, right? To me, there's just something about him using that instead of words, where I was like, I feel like I'm picking up on what Denis is putting down here.
Sure.
And it's like, this is the moment where he goes from being Paul Atreides, the man, Paul Atreides, the Bene Gesserit Kwisatz Haderach, to Paul Atreides, the divine being, right? The god, is in this moment when the Emperor kisses the ring. It's like, it feels like this is the moment where he stops being self-critical of, I can't be the Messiah. I'm just this guy, right? This is the moment where he's like, no, I am the fucking Messiah.
Yeah.
I am God, right? Kneel down, is sort of that. And it's done wordlessly. It works so well.
Yeah. He also asks for Irulan's hand in marriage, and Irulan pleads with him like, marry me, spare my father.
Yeah.
I don't have a ton to say about Florence Pugh.
Yeah.
She's not in the movie a ton, which I expected.
Right. She's in it a little bit.
She's in it more than she's in it.
She's in it more than she's in the book.
Yeah. She's throughout the movie in places, and I think she's good.
Yeah.
Looking forward to seeing what she does in Messiah.
I always like Florence Pugh. I like her here. Yeah. Likewise, we'll be excited to see her have more to do in Messiah. Yeah.
If we get it.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Fingers crossed. And Chani. Again, great acting from Zendaya here at this moment where he asks for her hand. There were audible gasps in the auditorium when this happened.
Yeah, because we get a reaction shot of Chani, and the thing that Zendaya seems to be playing here, which reads so well, is simultaneously, I am fucking destroyed by this because I am in love with this man, but also, of course.
Yeah.
Right? Like, she doesn't seem surprised. She seems heartbroken and also totally unsurprised. Right? Which I'm like, that is such a strong thing to play as this character in this moment.
And before he goes over to ask for Irulan's hand, he tells her, like, no matter what, I will love you as long as I breathe.
And the look that, again, they just do a reaction shot of her after he says that to her. The reaction shot of her, this is one of my favorite moments of acting from Zendaya, who is one of my favorite actors in this entire movie. When he says, no matter what happens, I will love you as long as I breathe. It goes back to her and what she seems to be playing, right? The look that she's communicating here is like, God damn it, why did he have to say that?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because basically what is reading from her is like, I want to believe him so bad because I love this guy with my whole heart and soul. And it would be so much easier if I could just say, fuck him. Right. And forget about it. And so it's like, God damn it, why did he have to say that? Because like now he has me. And I just, it's so good. She's so good. She's so good because she does all of that with a look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is a huge change from the book.
Yeah.
And I think it completely works. It gives the audience someone to relate to.
Yes.
It gives us a better perspective on Paul Atreides' character arc. And it gives Chani as a character more agency.
And it works so well. It's such a good decision. And as a fan of the book, it makes me end this movie in a way that I didn't really end the book when I read it, which is I am fully on Chani's side, right? I'm like in Chani's camp. I'm Team Chani, right? Where I'm like I want, like, she's the one I care about and the one I empathize with, which I think is important because it's like what you've been saying, it's important that Paul Atreides becomes a monster, becomes a villain in this movie, which I think they do well, right? And it's like, well, then as the audience, like you just said, you need someone to relate to, you need someone to root for. And I think the strong choice of having that person be Chani is something that this movie executes extremely well, right? Because it's like, yeah, as a viewer, like that's who I'm coming back for, right? I'm coming back for the story, but the person I'm coming back to spend more time with is her, right? Because I want to see what happens to her because I care about her, and it's not something that is included in the book, really, right? And I think, it's a great change. Yeah.
They receive communication from the other houses that they are refusing to recognize Paul's ascendancy to the throne.
Yes.
One of my favorite lines from the book that I really wish was in this scene is, it's another great thing that sums up Paul's character, where he says, "We Fremen have a saying, God created Arrakis to train the faithful.
Yeah.
One cannot go against the will of God."
Yeah.
I miss that line, but this scene also has what is a line that is not in the book and is one of my favorite lines in this entire movie.
Yep.
And completely sets the tone for this ending.
Yep.
Where Paul responds to hearing that the great houses are refusing to honor his ascendancy, he turns to the Fremen and he says, "Lead them to paradise."
Yeah.
And we start the fucking holy war.
Yep. Yeah.
This is at this point in the movie, basically from the council all the way up to now, I am having like full body chills.
Yeah.
With Timothée Chalamet's delivery, with the lines, with Hans Zimmer's music, which of course is fucking great in this movie. I don't think we need to relitigate that at all.
Right.
And this ending is Denis Villeneuve knocked it out of the park.
Yes. Speaking of Denis Villeneuve knocking things out of the park, and also to just go back to the ballsiest, craziest creative choice that he made in this movie, there is a moment after Paul says, "Lead them to paradise," and we're doing the montage of the Fremen boarding the ships and taking off to go fight the great houses. We go to Lady Jessica, who is still pregnant with Aaliyah, and we do more utero vision where we're seeing the fetus, and we get Anya Taylor-Joy voiceover. This is wisely the only time this happens in this movie, because the rest of the time when Lady Jessica is communicating with Aaliyah, we don't hear Aaliyah. We only hear Lady Jessica say, "Oh, she says this," or "She's wondering this," or whatever, right? This is the only time we actually get Aaliyah voiceover as a fetus. And I'm like, I love that you did it once, and I love that you didn't do it any more times, right? But it's Anya Taylor-Joy goes, "What's happening, mother?" and Lady Jessica is basically like, you know, your brother is leading the Fremen to a holy war, pretty much.
Yeah.
It's
the final lines of the movie.
Yes.
It's, your brother challenges the great houses. The holy war begins.
Yes.
As the ships take off from Arrakis. And
Yes.
Hans Zimmer cranks up the music.
And it rocks, and it's such a good moment for the ending. And also, it is just, again, it's fucking insane that he pulls this off without it seeming stupid or weird or too over the top, right? Because when you think about if you looked at the words written on paper, right? Fetus, Aaliyah Atreides, parentheses, fetus, end parentheses.
Interior, Jessica's womb.
Right. Interior, Jessica's womb. Fetal Aaliyah Atreides, voiceover, right? What's happening, mother? Like, it sounds so stupid and insane and campy and dumb, right? And then you see it in the movie and you're like, God damn it, he fucking did it. And it's like, it's incredible. It's amazing. And again, very strong choice to only do this once, to do it as the last line of the movie, right? And to never have done it previously. Because if this thing was packed wall to wall with Anya Taylor-Joy in utero voiceover, it would be fucking insane. But yeah, like, that's Dune Part 2.
And we get a shot of a scene of Chani
heading
back into the desert and calling a sandworm.
Yeah.
Presumably alone. I don't think there's any Fremen left out there.
Yeah. And I love that we don't see the worm here.
Yeah.
I love that it's just the worm sign.
Yeah.
And then her face.
It's a close up on her face and then it cuts to black.
Because it would be so easy to end it with like a big bombastic, like, oh, we're gonna like show her riding the worm and it's gonna be this big, and we'll end with like the worm cresting a dune with the sun behind it or whatever.
We need to feel the tragedy of this moment, and we need to feel her pain and her isolation, and we need to feel like, you know, she's trying to return to a way of life that all of the rest of her culture has now abandoned and moved on from.
Yes. And I love that in the last moment, instead of doing the big spectacle thing that I was just saying they could have done, what we end on is Zendaya's face, right? It's just her face going through all of those things that you were just talking about, right? And we end the movie, we end the second of this two-part story, right? On the face of a character experiencing inner turmoil, because that's what Dune's fucking about. It's not about big action set pieces. It's about the interior life of these characters. And Denis fucking gets it. And he ends the movie in a way that makes it very clear that he fucking gets it. Yeah.
That's Dune Part 2, baby.
That's Dune Part 2.
Justus.
Yeah.
I've been wanting to ask you this for a week.
Yes, we haven't been allowed to talk about it because we've been saving our thoughts for this record.
Is Dune Part 2 the greatest movie ever made?
David, I'm going to just be... We've talked extensively about this movie at this point. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. Yes, Dune Part 2 is the greatest movie ever made. This is a worthy sequel to Part 1. I said that I might circle back on my initial post-theater thoughts that I maybe like Part 1 a little bit more than Part 2.
Oh, yes.
I do still think that's maybe sort of kind of true because Part 1 is moodier and more atmospheric and a lot more action happens in Part 2. And I am a sucker for mood and atmosphere and vibes. And I just fucking really love how Part 1 nails all of that shit. That being said, I think Part 2 makes Part 1 even better by its existence, right? Because it applies so much context and flavor to the stuff that has already happened in the first installment. So if I'm saying that Part 1 is my preferred part of Denis Villeneuve's Dune movies, it's not a detriment to Dune Part 2. It's maybe even additional praise for that movie because the second one makes the first one better. And even if Dune Part 1 is maybe my preferred installment here, Dune Part 2 is a worthy follow-up. It fucking rocks, and it's the greatest movie ever made. David, is Dune Part 2 the greatest movie ever made?
Like you said, comparing this to Part 1, and kind of weighing these two movies back and forth, I'm having a hard time separating them.
Yeah.
Because we now live in a world where, you know, in a few months, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to watch Dune Part 1, I'm going to take a 15-minute poop, and then I'm going to pop in Dune Part 2, right?
That's right. And that'll be your whole day.
I'm going to have a 5-hour Dune marathon, and I'm so happy that we live in that world.
Yeah.
So the first film, to me, was Denis proving that the Dune universe could work for a wider audience. We could introduce a wider audience to this strange and wonderful and crazy world that Frank Herbert created in a way that makes them forget about that David Lynch movie that sells Dune as an interesting and compelling science fiction universe for a 21st century audience. But the meat of the story and nailing the thematic intent of Frank Herbert's novel was always going to be in Part 2. And it's a place where Dune 1984 struggled by speeding through all of this, this part of the story and, changing Paul Atreides to being more heroic and just getting rid of that deeper commentary. The miniseries that I watched recently this week, again, also kind of struggles with this section of the book too. I think most people see the process of adaptation as fulfilling a checklist, and this movie doesn't do that. Mm-hmm. Everything this movie adapts directly from the book, as well as every change that this movie makes, is done in service of Denis Villeneuve's interpretation of Frank Herbert. Yeah. And in every case, it is expertly done.
Yep.
And in an oversaturated market of like $300 million movies with terrible visual effects that fit into a business model of franchise filmmaking.
Flash catching strays in this verdict.
Fucking, you bet your ass it is. Just like an endless stream of disposable content. The fact that a movie with the scale, scope, emotional depth, thematic complexity, and also the thrilling popcorn entertainment, the fact that a movie like that can come out feels like a genuine triumph and a special moment.
Yeah.
I haven't seen something like this since the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Yeah.
This is a movie that comes around once in a generation.
Yeah.
And Justus, I've been waiting to say this for a week, because I kind of knew it when we walked out of that theater.
Yeah.
But you bet your fucking ass Dune Part 2 is the greatest movie ever made.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. +1 to literally everything that you just said. it was very eloquently put. My verdict was me rambling and being like, it makes part 1 better. But deeply agree with literally everything you said. I think you hit the nail on the head. Yeah.
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
Good movie.
Hell yeah.
Can't wait for Messiah.
Can't wait for Messiah.
Hopefully.
Messiah's going to be a fucking... It'd be great to have a science fiction trilogy that's just a fucking downer.
Yeah.
That'd be so awesome.
Right, because Messiah, I mean, I haven't read the book.
Messiah's a huge downer.
I haven't read the book yet, but I do know how it ends already,
Yeah.
just because I've been immersed enough in Dune lore
Great
that
ending.
I know some spoilers, right? And I know Messiah ends on a down note.
Yeah.
It's a real... I'm not going to say what happens because it's a spoiler for anyone who maybe wants to see Denis Villeneuve's Messiah or read the book themselves before it comes out. But yeah, just big bummer. And I love the idea that it's like, yeah, Denis Villeneuve might make his bummer sci-fi trilogy and they're fucking all masterpieces and everybody, they go down in history as like an amazing sci-fi trilogy and you watch it and you're just like, oh, fuck. Now I gotta go think about my existence. Yeah.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
If you're still with us, once again, thanks for letting us nerd out about Dune for these 2 fucking episodes. I promise that you won't have to hear the words Kwisatz Haderach from us for a while.
Yes. We cannot make the same promise about George Lucas appearing on the podcast because who knows, that guy might just live in my walls now.
Justus, what are we talking about next week?
We're going to be talking about The Craft. The 90s teen witch film starring Neve Campbell and Fairuza Balkan and Skeet Ulrich with our dear friend Audrey Young.
So we hope you will join us for that. Another thrilling installment of the greatest movie ever made. In the meantime, please talk about the show, tweet about the show, tell your friends about the show, tell an enemy about the show.
Yes.
Say, hey, you fucking bastard. I hate you. Listen to the greatest movie ever made.
Yes, the Fade Rotha to your Paul Atreides. Make sure that they're listening to the show as well.
Until we see you next time, as always,
later dipshits. We hope you enjoyed this episode of The Greatest Movie Ever Made. Please remember to leave us a rating and a review, and to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. We appreciate you supporting the show and spreading the word. Tell your friends to listen, tell your enemies to listen, tell your mom to listen. If your neighbor has an unsecured Bluetooth speaker, connect to it and play an episode. You can follow us on social media at TGMEM_podcast. And if you've got a movie that you want us to talk about, send us an email at thegreatestmoviepodcast@gmail.com.